in July to start planning for the 2017 budget and to also engage in a discussion regarding long-range financial planning. At that meeting, as we identified a couple weeks back, one of the major points of emphasis was how the city would be absorbing new debt service to the tune of approximately $650,000 in the wake of issuing $9 million worth of bonds for construction of our new combined public works facility, which is now underway. We also engaged in some discussions and review of long-term capital needs identified by staff throughout the city, and that includes infrastructure, equipment, and facilities. At the conclusion of the July 20th meeting, staff was directed to come back with a draft budget in September that met the objective of maintaining a flat tax rate of $3.05 per $1,000 of assessed value. And in September, a couple weeks ago, we brought you a draft budget that got us about halfway there. As we mentioned at that meeting, the new debt service was equivalent to about 14 cents on the tax rate, and we included a list of optional expenditure reductions that you reviewed. And after some discussion at that meeting on September 20th, staff was then directed to come back and meet the original objective of a flat tax rate for the FY 2017 budget. As we recounted on September 20th, with respect to the process that we went through this year, in order to meet the objective identified by the committee, the department heads who are here tonight convened on a weekly basis to identify expenditure reductions which would help us to absorb the debt service amount coming into the budget next year, and to identify and prioritize those expenditure reductions. We also went through a fairly exhaustive process of reviewing the draft departmental budgets and identify other areas where we might be able to gain some efficiencies or identify some budget savings utilizing three-year trend analysis. We also looked at staffing levels across all departments and all divisions within those departments. And we also looked at the revenue side of the equation and made some adjustments that are in the proposed budget before you this evening. Following the discussion on September 20th, we went back to work in order to meet the objective of the flat tax rate budget. And as is indicated in your document before you tonight, we've eliminated most of the optional expenditure reductions that you reviewed on September 20th. We also had to account for adjusting a decrease in the levy of approximately $285,000 after we received final assessed values from the assessor's office following that September 20th meeting. As indicated on the capital worksheets, spending in those accounts and across the proposed project items for 2017 has been reduced by $430,000, and we also applied an additional $50,000 of fund balance to meet the flat tax rate objective. On the list of expenditure adjustments are also some other minor revenue enhancements and some expense adjustments. A couple weeks back, we kind of reviewed an overview, and this is included in the budget transmittal letter within the binder tonight. These are the major categories of revenues contained within the budget, and you can see from a total revenue standpoint, revenues in the general fund will be increasing by about $45,000 next year into 2017, which is 0.3% higher than in 2016. You can see we have a decrease in licenses and permits, which is generally attributable to some revised numbers that you'll see in the building permit line item in the budget. And we also have a significant change in the other revenues category, which accounts for moving about 1.5 full-time equivalents out of the general fund into the sewer and the water utilities. There's an offsetting expenditure adjustment that cancels out that decline in the revenue. On the expenditure side, there's a $45,000 increase on a year-over-year basis from 2016 to 2017. You can see that salaries and benefits are really the cost drivers going into 2017, and salaries are increasing by just under 2%, and some of the benefit costs that we talked about in September relative to pension benefits and health insurance benefits and complying with the Affordable Care Act are driving our benefit costs into 2017. But as you can see on some of the lower line items on the table before you, staff's work is apparent in some of the decreases that we're seeing in some of the other major expenditure categories, especially in the areas of materials and supplies and facilities and plant. So when it all comes down to it, the budget is balanced, and we're looking at an increase in both revenues and expenditures in the general fund of under $50,000 heading into next year. As I mentioned, we went through an exhaustive process to get expenditure reductions in the draft budget that was presented in September 20th. Those amount to approximately $364,000, and those are within the budget that's before you tonight. I talked a little bit about the optional list of expenditure items that we proposed for consideration. That list was about $417,000, and we included none of those items in the budget except for general city memberships and council salaries. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we've now gone ahead and identified another $565,000 that are included in the budget tonight, and that we anticipate that you'll be reviewing and discussing once staff has completed their presentation. And so there's been a lot of work done in order to bring this budget into balance and to meet the tax rate target identified by the committee. Should the committee seek to restore any of the reductions identified either initially or the optional reductions discussed a couple weeks back, or the reductions identified since September 20th, obviously your funding sources include fund balance, an adjustment to the tax rate, the city tax rate, or reducing other expenditures that are currently within the budget. So this slide basically gives you an overview of all the processes we've gone through, the iterations, so to speak, to get to tonight and to get to a balanced budget. This slide gives you an overview, and it's a listing that's contained in the appendix of your budget document tonight of all the reductions that have been identified since September 20th. The items in the green are contained in the memo that was circulated earlier this week, and that staff suggests that the committee spend the majority of their time considering this evening if you're looking to add any items back into the budget. The items that are not shaded are items that we think we can live with in the budget and that will not have a detrimental effect on our operations going into 2017. We're not currently, if you could go back, Tom, we're not currently treating weeds at the Shoreland Nature Preserve. We feel an adjustment to our insurance deductibles from $7,500 to $10,000 is reasonable given our claims history. And we think we're going to be able to negotiate a reduction in our legislative management system costs carrying into next year. We've also made some adjustments to the line item salaries for fire and EMS, and we've applied some other revenue adjustments as well based on additional history that we've had since the budget that was presented in September. We're also recommending memberships and salaries be considered, and they're currently part of the budget. If we go to the next slide, all the items, again, shaded in green are areas where the council or the committee may want to concentrate their efforts tonight. We feel as a staff that those would be the items that would be most prioritized from our perspective if you were looking to add back any items of spending going into 2017. We've reduced notably the $75,000 that we included initially for compliance with the Affordable Care Act. Upon further consideration and discussion, we felt that number was the worst case scenario, and we feel as though we're not going to have everyone that's eligible for insurance taking insurance because they may or will already have insurance. We're still working through that process, so we don't have clarity on what the numbers are, but we don't want to necessarily budget to the extreme when we don't know that everyone's going to be looking to take insurance or that we're going to be subject to a penalty for everyone that's eligible within the fire department. So we've trimmed that number, and then as I mentioned, we applied another $50,000 in fund balance in the proposed budget before you tonight. Here's a listing of all of the capital requests, and in the column that's titled recommended, these were the amounts that were included in the draft budget that was presented on September 20th. You'll see at the very bottom that foots to a total of $743,000, which was identical to the amount of capital funding that was approved in last year's budget. As we move forward to the October 13th budget that's before you tonight, and as I mentioned earlier, we've had to trim some of that capital spending for 2017, and so the column to the very far right on this table indicates the revised amounts that are included in the budget tonight. And you can see that some of the line items have been taken down to zero. Some of them have been reduced by anywhere from $5,000 or $6,000 to $50,000 if you're looking at the public works equipment line item. So this is kind of a snapshot of where we've been and where we are today relative to the capital requests for next year that are included in the budget.
So it's just to bring us back to where we are with fund balance, we're looking at appropriating another $300,000 from the end of 2015 fund balance value. It'll be the fifth straight year that the city has balanced the budget using fund balance. We'll be going out to, we'll be talking to Moody's in 17 and again in 18 when we borrow funds for various major projects coming ahead. With the $300,000, where we stand now is that the fund balance percentage as far as next year's budget is about 14%. And as the committee probably understands, as we've taken a tighter approach to getting this budget to balance, there is less wiggle room basically to have a favorable outcome of expenses or revenues for that matter. So the ability to generate a surplus going forward will be more challenging. As I said before, the budget before you meets state levy limits. We're looking at a mill rate of about $3.05. We still think Mequon is among the lowest tax rates in the state of Wisconsin, at least for developed cities. Each penny in the levy is worth about $45,000. And with the 0.3 of a penny increase that's built into this budget, that's equivocates to about $1 a year on a $400,000 home.
So pulling it all together, and we don't want to take up too much time tonight with presentation slides and staff talking, because we were here just a couple of weeks ago and we presented a lot of this information to you. We've worked hard along with all of you on the committee to prepare a budget that has no increase to the tax rate. We've included several layers of reductions, and we've applied some fund balance to absorb the new debt service obligations that'll be with us going forward over the next 15 years, and some of the other mandated increases relative to health insurance and retirement and the Affordable Care Act that we don't, frankly, have a lot of control over. And as you can see, we've identified those reduction amounts there along with the fund balance. And tonight, staff really sees this as an opportunity for the committee to now take the zero tax rate budget and, as you mentioned at your meeting a couple weeks ago, talk about those items, if any, that you might want to consider adding back in from the list of expenditure reductions that have been applied since September 20th, or that are contained in the memos that each of the department heads prepared and that are included in your budget binder this evening. So the department heads are here. They're gathered around the table. They're certainly available to speak to any questions that you may have regarding the information contained in their memos or regarding some of the resource challenges that they see in their respective departments. And we'll certainly do our best to answer any questions that you have as you go through your discussions tonight.
I have a few questions. First, I wonder if this budget includes the transportation aids that were reported today in the news graphic. There was a report in the graphic today that said state transportation aids coming to Mequon would be $300,209 for general transportation and $17,000 for connecting highway payment. Do you know if that's in the budget?
It's in the budget.
It is? Okay, so you knew about it before it got, I thought probably you were, just wanted to make sure. As I reviewed this budget, I was quite troubled by a number of things. But most in particular, it appeared to me, I just want to make certain that I'm reading it right, that the budget for facilities repairs or improvements that might need to be made is $16,000. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Yes.
That is correct.
So we've cut out capital spending or capital budget to cover needs of all of our buildings, down to 16,000. Folks, I spent 26,000 on preventive maintenance on my house, my 2,200 square foot simple little house this year. And we're only putting $16,000 into this budget to take care of repairs. If some of the equipment that staff showed us, like the boiler stack at the safety department, which is way, way past its lifetime and keeps breaking down, and the city staff can't even fix it anymore. And we're going to have $16,000 available to help cover that. That's insane. That's
Well,
insane.
There's no question that we've identified some needs from a capital perspective across the city. And I think the meeting in July took a look at some of our needs from a city fleet perspective, some of our larger pieces of equipment that have been with us for 20, 30, even 40 years. We looked at the condition of some of our facilities, some of the equipment within those facilities, and we're taking a look at some of our infrastructure needs that serve the community on a daily basis. And as the committee will recall, one of the recommendations that's contained in the capital plan for 2017 is formulation of a comprehensive capital asset management plan. It looks at all of those areas so that the committee and staff can begin to prioritize and understand what the funding needs are across all of our capital assets. And rather than taking a Band-Aid approach and fixing this and not even considering that when we're doing a capital improvement, we want to understand everything that's under the hood before we start spending the resources that are not unlimited.
I understand that, Will, and I appreciate it. I honestly appreciate all the work that staff has done to meet this council's expectation that there would be, for an 8th year in a row, no tax rate increase. But spending $25,000 to have an asset management assessment done to give us something that we can start planning with is one thing. But we're not going to get that until the end of sometime in the middle or end of next year. In the meantime, we have facilities that, in all likelihood, is going to have some repair needs that will come up during the year, and we aren't setting aside any money for it. I don't think that's right. On top of that, we will need, at some point, this community needs to be setting aside money for capital needs. And there's nothing in this budget that sets aside any money for capital needs. It's just sort of like, oh, well, we want a zero rate increase, or no increase. We want to keep everything flat for taxpayers who haven't, in fact, asked for us to keep it flat. When I talk to people, I don't find anyone who thinks that being able to have no increase in 8 years is wise or even needed. You know, having a tax rate that increased 15 cents even would not be that great a deal for most people in this community. And we're not doing our job. We're not setting money aside for meeting needs when they come up. If something happens to that boiler stack, just as one example, and we have to spend $20,000 or $30,000, and we have 16 in the budget for all buildings, what are we going to do?
Okay, that's an item that's listed on probably the second thing we want to address, but let's do this methodically. Okay, we're not here to discuss philosophy. We're here to approve a budget. We asked for a no tax rate increased budget and a list of the things that were removed to get us there. And we have that list. It's behind one of the green tabs in your book. So the staff gave us what we asked for. Here's the list of things that were left out. Let's go through that list and see if anybody wants to add back any of these items. And we know where we are. It's all in there.
Well, since you said don't get into philosophy, I won't. I would add, though, it's actually been more than 8 years. It's 8 years. 8 years ago, there was an adjustment, but it was only because of a reassessment. But I think, and I do believe that there are people who have asked if it make keeping taxes steady or low is their number one or close to their number one goal. But to move into the next phase on proposals, I'm going to pass out. I went through and I had a couple of conversations with a few staff members. Take this and take one and pass it down, because I try to look at this globally rather than you go item by item by item, and most of the things on the list seem like pretty good ideas, but somewhere we got to get to a place we can live with it also. So what I tried to do, using the same list that staff had on this yellow sheet, and go through, and I listed all the items. I listed things that I would use, and it doesn't matter whether it comes out of the fund balance, because I'll explain in a minute, or tax rate, but I started with fund balance adjustments, tax rate adjustment, other, and then at the bottom of the page, an amount for a capital reserve fund. And that's so that we have $300,000, so that when we've done that study, there's at least something to spend. Once we've determined priorities among capital funds, or capital needs, that there's something there to spend. This addresses many of the things on the list. A few of the things I said, and mostly, not just the capital fund, reserve fund, because I know Will feels very strongly we shouldn't just start picking and choosing, among capital items without really having a good prioritization of capital items. So this creates some money, but we can then have the prioritization. And on a few other items where staff has suggested something should happen, I think we need to do some sort of a greater review. For example, we throw a little bit of money at bike paths, but I'm not really sure what that does and where that's going, and it would be good to have a better review of that. The concept of a deputy fire chief. I read the chief's memo. It was well written, but I'm not really sure why. And I think that ought to be explored by the Public Works Committee, and there ought to be a little more analysis before we just add a $100,000 a year or whatever the number is here. I'm looking, $116,000 a year perpetual expenditure. So, I'm not saying that none of these things don't have merit, but I think there are some things that you want to do now. The police officer, I feel strongly we ought to have one, but I also understand that maybe that ought to go along with a review on staffing levels in the police department. Do we have the right number of higher echelon officers, the right number of lower echelon officers? So I'm suggesting we actually budget for it, but that we don't actually hire that person until we've done more of a, public safety, or somebody has done more of a review with the chief on staffing needs. So now, Does this get us to zero? It doesn't. It uses up fund balance. We're still a little in excess of the 10%, which was the goal the city had, and for years we were way below that goal. We worked to get there. The reason why we've gone backwards is simply because you generated more cash. The reason why we had higher numbers, the whole goal was to have 10%. And but this does propose a 6 cent tax increase, which is 2%. Now, in 12 years on the council, I never proposed a tax increase. I was all in favor of a tax levy freeze, which is worse than a tax freeze. But I do think at some point you've got to have increasing revenues. I looked in the same period that the city's revenues have increased by 0.7% over the last 15 years. You know, the state's a couple times that. The federal government is multiple times that, and the federal government runs big deficits on top of that. So we're reliant on one type of revenue that, you know, largely, and that's real estate taxes. And then as we increase the value of those taxes, we've decreased our tax rate, keeping a steady levy. But you can't do that forever. You just can't. And as I pointed out in the last meeting, we're receiving in taxes with this new budget almost exactly the same amount as we received the year I first was elected an alderman in 2001. That's not perpetual. That's not sustainable. At some point, you've got to be able to adjust for greater needs, or even simply the fact that costs go up. I mean, that's the biggest thing. The city's done a great job in creating efficiencies, reducing staffing levels, and there's more that can be, you know, I wonder this building. This building is an enormously large building for 21 employees or 22 who are here all the time. Maybe there's a way to deal with this more efficiently. I don't know that, but I don't know that anybody's ever really looked at that. Do we have way too much space? But I think, you know, you have to be somewhere in the middle. You can't be spending everything everybody wants to spend. You can't also say, we're never going to spend a nickel more than we spent 15 years ago. That doesn't work. So, I'm not saying this, you know, people may disagree with individual points on here, but I tried to look at this more globally rather than walking through, I forget how many different items there are, but there's like 40 of them. Because on an awful lot of them, yes, we should do that. But how do you fit that into a disciplined budget also? This was at least an attempt.
I think before we get into all the items for consideration, there's still the matter of the $363,000 roughly that's permanently baked in. I've got a couple questions on a few items in there. I'm sure others might as well. There's things in there that we may not agree on. I don't know how much attention we're paying to any of that. So I don't know who else might have any questions on those. It's in the original proposed FY17 expenditure reductions, and even items from the rest of the packet. Might I propose we just go through them a department at a time, and if anyone's got any questions, air them in a somewhat methodical manner.
I go back to what I said. We asked for a no tax rate in budget. We got it. And we have a list of the things that were removed to get us there. So if you don't want the budget that's been submitted to you, you have to look through these items. And you can make any motions you want. And I encourage you to do that because that's how we get done with this process. Okay?
Maybe we should
If you look at this list,
Somewhere at the end.
there's 23 items on it. 10 of them have been recommended by staff. Included. So the first question that I would ask is, does anyone disagree with the 10 items that have been slated for reduction on that chart by staff?
At least in part, a little bit, yes.
Excuse me?
At least in part, a little bit, yes.
I want to see what this
At
is.
least in part, not globally, but a couple of them I would like to talk more about.
If you disagree with eliminating the weed treatment, say so.
I'm backing up even farther than that, though, Dan.
Pardon?
The list of original ones, there's a quite lengthy list that we've had for some time now. If
Okay.
anyone has any questions on that, and I've got a couple, I would like to go through those. I don't think it'll take.
Let's do these charts one at a time.
Yeah, just dial back to the beginning, please, not kind of almost jumping to the end.
What are you looking at?
Well, everyone's got it in their packet. This, the original
What's it entitled?
proposed FY17 expenditure reductions. It's the original one we had for the
Starts with the mayor and
last.
common council.
Yeah.
Proposed expenditure reductions?
By department, yeah. One that goes department.
Behind
by
the yellow
department.
tab.
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
And again, just to provide some background, any of the items that appear on these pages that are broken down by division were suggested by department heads as we caucus together to meet the objective. Other items, many of the other items, were arrived at through the departmental budget review process. And while the items or the dollar amounts contained in the list may not tie to any particular expenditure, it's based on that 3-year trend analysis that we did across expenditure categories.
Very good.
Okay, so we're looking at that chart. It's 1, 2, 3, 6 pages.
So my first question wasn't an item on the chart, but in the city administrator's office budget, there's $100,000 for contingency. I thought we talked about it briefly last time. Is there $100K of contingency so that there's funds to tap in some sort of emergency that you don't have to go back and get authorization for
No.
from the council? What's the $100K used for?
The breakdown is roughly $75,000 for the COLA allowance for non-represented employees.
Okay,
So everyone in this room, plus the rest of city hall staff, DPW, et cetera. And then roughly $25,000 or so for contingencies.
okay. It's just tough to tell what that was for as a line item. Okay, I understand that better. I don't know if I'm as uncomfortable with it as I was. Under legal services, I thought when I looked through the year over year, it looked like we actually spent more than this in previous years. Just what's the plan to deal with there's outside help we usually get and need? How are we going to live without it?
Well, these two expenditure categories pertain to outside special counsel in one category, and then labor counsel in the other category. And these items have been adjusted by $5,000 each, based on the fact that we don't necessarily, or have not been necessarily, spending to what's been in the budget in the last couple of years.
Varies tremendously.
I'm sure, but
There's no real way to estimate.
Well, I assume there's less because we don't have as many, well, that's been a few years now, but so you have fewer represented employees also than it used to be. But I guess you guys have been used to that.
under,
I guess the question is, so but basically what you're saying is history of the last year or two indicate we have not needed to spend this, have we needed to spend any?
Well, for instance, if you look at special legal labor, the very last line item on the legal budget within the document, in 2015, we spent $4,500. And for 2016, we budgeted $20,000.
Okay.
And I'm suggesting that we don't need to budget $20,000 again. We're going to be budgeting $15,000, recognizing that we're going to be entering into collective bargaining on a new police officer contract here in the fourth quarter. But it's probably not going to take us $20,000.
And I wanted to make sure you had that accounted for, because
Yes.
I knew that was coming up.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Just moving down the list, under public safety, police, the education incentive, do we just not use those dollars typically? Or are we actually cutting a benefit?
It varies every year. It's a contractual benefit. If they take a approved course, we pay 100% if they get an A or a B, or 50% if they get a C. So it all depends on how many courses are taken each year.
And it's not a benefit you can cut because it's under the collective bargaining agreement, right?
It's one of those items that's really hard to budget for because you have a degree of variability based on the motivation of
Sure.
officers within the department. We don't want to be over budgeting that amount on a year-over-year basis. Nevertheless, we want to make sure we've got money in there to meet our obligation in the years that we may have an officer or a set of officers pursuing advanced education.
And then similarly on uniforms, we just determined if we need fewer uniforms, or?
That's another contractual thing. They get so much per year to keep their uniforms looking good. And then,
But we've been traditionally underspending it, so.
well, that's a set amount by contract, and then I usually budget in some more for any new hires, or if their uniforms get damaged, if they scuffle with somebody, or, you know, if they get damaged on duty, we have to replace them and things like that, so. Do a little extra for that.
And does this cut suggest that you've been budgeting a little more than you need, or are we nickel and diming this line item?
Well, it's another one of those where you never know how much you're gonna spend, how many get damaged, or if we hire another officer, things like that, but, you know, it's usually right around what I budget, maybe a little less.
Had another question on the tip 411 text service. If we get zero value out of it, I'm fine with it. Just struggling with cutting a communication avenue for people to get in contact with you in non-emergency situations. I think more and more people are more comfortable with texting now than picking up a phone. So I'd like to hear a comment on that.
It is fairly popular. When we first started it, we were hoping to get tips that were helpful for our investigations. Many of the tips we're getting now are less serious in nature. Some of them are pranks. We get a lot on things that people could actually call us about, and you know, there's no concern about them remaining anonymous for the tip that they're giving, but I think it's just easier for them to text it in. It just hasn't panned out to be what we were hoping for with investigative tips, but certainly we get real ones every now and then, but not what we were hoping for.
So you're totally comfortable if we eliminate it?
I could go either way. I understand where you're coming from, that it's a more modern way of communicating that people are comfortable with.
I just think it's likely to be more and more prevalent. Maybe I'm wrong. I've used it a handful of times, but don't keep it because I use it. I'll throw it out there. I move to put that back in, and let's take a straw poll. Is that okay way to do this?
Make a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there discussion?
We just
I would
had
say
it.
people can call the police department when they have a tip. Alderman.
Well, that was one of the items I had when we came last time, and I had talked to the chief. I guess again, it's a function of a prioritization. If we're gonna put $5,000 into something, I'd rather have putting it towards cameras on the corner of Port Washington Road, which the chief thinks is a much better
So would he.
tool than this texting thing. I just think there's lots of nice things we can spend money on. We need to prioritize among which things we want to spend money on. And so, for example, the camera thing, I think in some of the capital improvements, because I would put that under a list of capital improvements, not a capital repair. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I think are more important than texting. Because I'm not sure how substantive texts get. I mean, if you're going to be really substantive, but you want to put it in writing, you're going to do it in an email. And
Then
if
you
you want to be
track.
substantive, you want to what?
Then you can be tracked. It's not anonymous then.
It's not really anonymous. They've got your phone number most of the time for most people, right?
No, it is completely anonymous. We
it
have
is?
no way of tracking who it is.
Oh,
What's the county have in place? Does the county have anything in place?
Same thing.
Can you piggyback on that service?
What are your other sources for tips? And are they more valuable than this?
Some people write letters and don't put their name or address on it. Some people call and ask to remain anonymous, and we need to honor that. Some people see an officer drive by and flag them down.
So what you're saying is this text service has not been as valuable as you thought it would be, and you have other means of getting tips,
Yes.
anonymous or not.
Correct.
Okay, if you favor putting this back in, raise your hand.
I brought it up, I'll raise my hand.
Motion fails. Okay, move on, Alderman Nerman.
I don't know, fire department memberships for the volunteers.
Yes, these are all things that were put in by staff,
I agree.
and we have $500,000 to deal with.
I've got nowhere to be.
but they're put in by staff because there was a goal to set to. So, I
Exactly.
mean, it is important to
Right.
look at, what is the weight that we should put on these?
Yeah, I'd like to know if there are things that have been put in because staff was so focused on getting to that zero increase, that they think is hurtful. You know, the fact that they put it in doesn't mean it's a good thing. I guess I'd like to know from
Put it in because
staff.
it was the least objectionable of all things they could put in.
But that's how budgeting's done
Oh,
also.
I agree, but, so I don't know, to me, it doesn't seem like an incredible price to pay. These are memberships for the volunteers.
What it is we sign them up for, there's a Wisconsin EMS Association and Wisconsin Firefighter Association. We sign them up for that, and they get like a quarterly or monthly newsletter, so you can see what's going on in the fire service. For myself, to be a member of the Chiefs Association, I guess it doesn't matter because I have lots of a network and other peers I can talk to, but for our volunteers who work who are a teacher or something, they don't have any other outlet to get that information other than this quarterly newsletter. It was a nice thing to do. We were told to find low-hanging fruit, and this was low-hanging fruit. I think it's a good thing for them to have, but again, it was low-hanging, so.
Does it help them in their, is it part of their education and training?
I think if you do something else for a living, whatever it is, you're a teacher or a gardener or whatever, and you do this volunteer thing for a very short period of time, I think any information you get above and beyond what you listen to me talk about for 2 weeks is important to you. Yes, so yes, I do.
I just think given the nature of our fire department, it's not an extravagant perk. I'll make a motion to consider putting it back in.
Mr. Mayor, you were a firefighter at one point. Did you find that to be useful?
I got a magazine. That a magazine,
Yes, if you're,
Firefighter of the Year, and yada.
if you're EMT, you got the EMS magazine, yes?
I read it. If I didn't get it, I wouldn't read it.
I'm just wondering, did it make you a better firefighter?
No. That's what training is for. You'd be better off putting more money into training. There's a motion. Is there a second? No. Carry on.
Hey, before you go on to the next page, I do have a question. Since the Police Reserve Department is so expensive anyhow, are we just reducing based on what, on the 3-year average, or are we actually reducing, cutting something that they actually would use? Particularly the maintenance repairs.
Yep.
I mean, that is like one of the biggest bargains, I think, in the city, the police reserves. And, you know, it's probably the budget that's the hardest to cut because they don't have a budget, but are we,
I'm thinking if they need $450 to fix something, we'll pay for it.
that's what I was
But
guessing.
do you want to put it in the budget, and do you want to argue about $450 item?
Okay, you're right. I just wanted to raise the,
If we have to fix something, where are we gonna bring it, get it from if we don't have
Comes
a
out
budget?
of general fund. You still pay for it, but it comes out of the general fund.
In 2015, we spent $4,600 in the police reserve budget. This year, we're projecting to spend almost $7,600, and the budget for next year includes $7,900.
okay, so we're not exactly,
We're not taking
okay.
budget down from where it's been.
I cross-referenced most of these, but I just saw that now. I mean, I'd gone through this on my own.
The last one I'll bring up is on community development and planning. We're really going to get rid of videotaping of the planning commission meetings.
We put that back in on the,
I think we did.
I can jump in here.
I think
We are going to continue to videotape plan commission meetings and televise plan commission meetings. We negotiated a flat rate for the videotaping and televising of all city meetings with our current videographer, Mike Gross, that went into effect at the beginning of this year. And so what we budgeted last year, a year from today, last fall, didn't account for that lower flat rate that is now in effect. And the rate previously used was for a 2-hour minimum, and then every hour on top of 2 hours was an hourly rate. We are now paying a fixed rate per meeting, which is saving us money not only on the common council expenses, but also for the planning commission.
so. This just reflects the savings. We're still going to do it. Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Good, because a lot of people would be upset if we got rid of that.
No.
I think communication's key.
but they're more important than we are, as far as
I'd like
people
to-
watching.
I'd like to raise a question on looking at the facilities, public works, facilities budget. You're gonna eliminate the city hall rugs with all of us tracking in salt through the winter? In my experience, if you don't clean carpet on a fairly, or at least, you know, a couple, 3 times a year, even in a place where it's light traffic, your rug's gonna get destroyed.
We
And
actually,
these haven't been replaced, I mean, they've been down for a very long time. I would think the least we can do is prevent loss of our carpeting by keeping it clean.
the rug contract, we actually don't own the rugs. They're for all the rugs out in front of City Hall that track through for the salt and people to wipe their feet in wet conditions, but we don't own them. They come in
Okay,
and
so this
replace
is,
them out with fresh ones and things like that.
so this
if-
is to protect the carpet that we have.
Actually, it's to protect people as they walk in on the bare linoleum floor as they come in the front of City Hall. There's mats in the lobby area and then mats as you go through, but we don't own them. So if you eliminate the contract, we would have to otherwise purchase rugs.
That's deductible on one broken leg.
So we'll buy our own rugs and
Yeah.
capitalize them, or we'll?
Well,
have no rugs?
I don't believe there's anything in the budget to purchase rugs, but the rugs will be estimated at $5,000 and then we would have to clean the rugs. But at the annual expenditure of $2,300, then they just do it all. So if the rug becomes worn, they trade it out. Otherwise, if it becomes dirtied or whatever else, then they switch it out.
I'll move to add this one back in. No commercial building, any commercial building has a rug, has a mat service.
Yep.
We're
He
gonna,
told me not to bring this up.
we're gonna,
Don't argue about a
someone's gonna slip
$2,000
and
rug contract.
fall, and then there's gonna be a lawsuit, and
Put it back in.
we'll have pissed away
Was it moved and seconded?
way more than
Yes.
$2,300.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second.
That was on my
to
list
put back
last time,
the
too.
$2,300 rug contract. If you support that, raise your hand. All right, that passes. There you go, there goes your
Protection notes.
It's around the
Rug
rug.
and mat
Anything else?
service in a public building.
Anything else on this list? All right, let's go back to,
Mr. Mayor, sorry. The second on that was who?
Seconded.
Pick either Rob or I, we both were tied.
Everybody wants a
And
second.
John wants
He's
to
over
be.
here working very hard.
you want these votes by acclamation? Is that good enough for you?
We're eliminating.
It's up to you, how do you want the minutes to read?
No, we're gonna have to vote. So, vote every-
You can just say it passes and a member has the right to request a polling under Robert's rules, but I don't think anybody's going to request the polling. It's pretty obvious.
We're going back to the list of reductions applied since September. That got us to this budget today. And there were 10 items on here that staff recommends remain reductions. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 9, 12, 18, and 21. They're recommended to stay in as reductions.
Not the other page.
Should we just go through them one at a time? I don't know, it's not that much work, is it?
Eliminate the weed treatment at the Shoreland Nature Preserve. Any concern
We're not even
about
doing
that?
it now,
It's like
so,
this.
we're not even doing it now, so.
Just,
I'd like to,
I'd like to request that we review it next year, if we do eliminate it this year.
Depends who owns the property.
Yes, absolutely, and that's why I asked to have it.
Okay, adjusting the insurance deductibles, anybody have a problem with that? Reduce the annual subscription costs for the legislative management system, we're not getting rid of it, we're just reducing, renegotiating our contract. Eliminate,
does that reduce any of the functionality or what they're going to do for us, or is that an assumption on what the, essentially, are the same services going to be at a reduced cost?
Well, we actually have a dual track going on this particular expenditure item. We are in the process of attempting to renegotiate the Excella contract, which is $14,760 a year. So that system, if we were able to renegotiate that contract, would stay in place. But as we've explained, we're also moving forward on a redo of our website. And as we've gone through the demonstrations, we completed 8 demonstrations over the last couple of weeks. We've identified a couple of firms that are moving forward in the process that actually supply this type of system within their entire suite of, or package, so to speak. So there's a potential, as we move through implementation into early 2017, that these costs may go completely away if we decide to pursue an alternative vendor. So we're running a dual track here. We're confident that at the very least that we're going to be able to reduce our expenses by about a third.
Okay, having that information online is, I think, incredibly important and responsible for people to be able to see your ordinances.
And we've put a lot of work in it across all of the departments to get that system up and running this year. We're not necessarily looking forward to switching or converting to a new provider, but if it makes sense fiscally, and it makes sense from a compatibility standpoint to be on one platform as opposed to two platforms, we're going to do it.
Sure. Okay.
Number 4, eliminate capital spending on computer printers.
Is that because we're leasing printers?
No, we own them, it's just that they're getting a little bit long in the teeth. They've got a lot of duty cycles. The IT coordinator recommends that we start looking at hardware replacement to make sure that they have uptime.
But physically replacing them and owning them as opposed to leasing them and having a firm come in and do the maintenance?
Yes.
All right.
What we do is we use a firm that we buy the toner from. In exchange, they do any kind of maintenance or fixes on the existing printers.
So that's part of ownership?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Tom, are we set up for, like, sometimes you have a bigger thing to print out from your computer, as I have at work, and I could send it to the main printers, because you have a few main printers that, when you do this kind of stuff, you go to. Do people have that ability to send it to the main printers if they have a little bigger job that's more important to do?
We do. In City Hall proper, we have 2 multi-function devices like you're talking about. So you have an 11 by 17, you can print it to that. If you need to go color, we have 1 color device in the house for that.
And anyone can send it from their computer, the job, to the main computer, the main printer?
Yes.
See, that's, to me, is taking the brunt of the job if they really need something big done.
We've reduced our printer footprint by quite a bit over the last 10 years or so. So we've got one within a fair amount of walking distance for everybody that works there. And then the 2 major printers, multi-function devices, are the workhorse of the place.
If we eliminate this, are we simply putting off a time when we might have to replace this? Or are we taking a chance that something will break and we will have to do it anyway? Or
Well, it's pretty much like any other story you're going to hear tonight. It's break-fix mode, so if it breaks, we're going to replace it, obviously, but we're going to try to stretch another year. We'll have this conversation a year from now.
Or before then, when you do your capital, I mean, won't that be part of the capital budgeting process review on and computers and other equipment?
I would anticipate there'll be an IT component.
Yeah, so. I mean,
so
you-
we're simply putting off everything capital until we have a full list of what we need, and we'll have to do this next year.
In this case, instead of being proactive, we're going to be
So
reactive.
instead of increasing the tax rate a little bit this year and a little bit next year, it potentially is a lot next year. Is that where we're going?
I hope not.
Our challenge was to deliver that 0-cent rate increase, and so this was identified as a way to make that work.
And there is $512,000 worth of capital spending in the 2017 budget for projects in 2017, funding and/or projects. So we're not eliminating all capital spending.
It has been cut back drastically from your year prior, though. Was it 760 last year, or was that the number?
743.
743, okay, it's close.
Will,
Not into the big ticket items yet. Alderman Adams?
are we talking about the capital improvement? Is that study that you're proposing we have done by other people next year? And how much was that again?
25,000.
I sometimes question that, if we really need to do that, because I'm just saying this out loud for cutting. Because we have staff that knows City Hall better than anyone, than bringing an outsider in. I would think Kristen would know what she needs in her areas. And I was very bothered when you said it's also going to compare our roads to other communities. We've always set our own road standards. We don't need to compare ourselves to Brookfield and everyone. And I have a feeling if we did, we're going to be on top anyway, because we really have a great road program here. So down the road, if we do need to cut some more, I would like to look at that, because I think our staff could do that study on their own, but that's my opinion.
Number 5, reduce capital spending on police equipment by $5,000 from 30 to 25. That was not recommended by staff.
I mean, that's one the staff has suggested we may want to consider adding back in.
Correct.
You want to just go over the ones where they can we do this in two parts? The one where they don't suggest doing it, and then the ones where they do suggest, so we're.
We're doing that, we're just going
Let's
item
go
for
straight
item,
down the list. I don't know.
All right,
so we don't talk about things twice.
well, I'd move to add that back in.
I'd second that.
Motion and a second to add back $5,000 to capital spending on police equipment.
Yeah, that's up here.
And what would that go to again?
Your
Yeah.
list.
Well, I actually requested 50,000. And I'll tell you why, because we have about 50,000 in there right now. But if you recall, a few months ago, I brought forth a resolution to purchase new squad cameras and body cameras for the officers. And that was gonna be about $72,000. We only had 50,000 in there, so you elected to go with a payment plan. So we're paying that off every month. We're not gonna have enough to pay that off currently with the 50,000 that's in there. We also need to replace our defibrillator units in the squads soon. Wow. And then that would leave us nothing for anything else, radar units or traffic cones or taser cartridges or any of the other equipment we buy, so. That was my initial request, was 50,000 to try and cover those items, some of which we've already purchased that we didn't have money for.
What do we need to get to what we purchased for break even? So that we're covering our commitments. Is the 5,000 added back in get us to what we've committed to? Or what part of that 50 are you chatting about with regards to that?
Well, the cameras alone were 72,000, so we've made a few payments. We probably still owe 60-some thousand on those alone.
That's on a how many year term? Forgot.
We went with the longest term. You can prepay early if you want, but I think it was there was no penalty if you picked the longest one, 2 or 3 years.
So if you continue to make payments on that, since there's no prepayment penalty, how much do you need to be able to cover the things that you requested money for?
I don't recall what the monthly payment was, 2,000.
Okay, we're getting off track here. We're dealing with the budget that was submitted, reduction of 30,000 to 25,000. Motion and a second to put that 5 back. Now, if we want to talk about additional funding for the police department, that comes when we look at this.
Okay.
So,
Well, no, this is looking at this, because this number is on here already. That's why I was saying,
it's
They're the
on
same.
page 1.
right, oh, yours on
All the
page 2.
stuff that
On page
staff
2.
would like that's not included is on page 2.
Got it, right.
We'll end up with $5 per thousand at the rate we're going here. So,
Do any of us get one?
call the roll on this question.
Alderman Bouquet,
Aye.
Alderman Meyer,
Aye.
Alderman Wirt,
Aye.
Alderman Gero,
No.
Alderman Hawkins,
Aye.
Alderman Nervin,
Aye.
Alderman Adams,
No?
Mayor Avendroth,
Aye.
Alderman Strelchak.
Aye.
7 to 2. And that 5,000 is put back in. Item 6 is updated fire EMS salary and benefit cost adjustments. That's not really cut, that's just an adjustment to the wages. To meet the target.
I have a question, and I might have missed this. When we're adding back in, have we already decided where that money's gonna come from? Is it coming from the general reserve, or is it gonna up the taxes?
We'll decide that second.
Because I have a hard time making these votes not knowing where the money's gonna come from, just so you know. I think that would be nice to know up front.
Well, if you have a revenue source, tell us what it is, but otherwise it comes from.
Well, but those are two different sources. That's why I did mine kind of comprehensively, because you've got there is some fund balance availability, and there potentially is a tax rate adjustment,
Fund
and
balance
for
is-
example, one item I have coming from another source.
Fund balance is on the next page, we'll get to that.
Yeah. But I mean, to answer her question, it's,
Well, it's hard to make these votes when you don't know where the money's coming from, so. Yeah.
Assume it comes from the tax levy unless you're gonna increase the amount we put into the budget from the reserve account.
Exactly, we don't have that answer now, do we?
Well, we'll find, when we're done, we'll find out how much we've spent here.
well, they're going to take more than that,
Okay.
effect fees. Or I think we're going to do borrowing.
Moving on to number 7, reduce capital spending on hydraulic rescue equipment from $16,000 to $10,000, a $6,000 reduction.
I'd move to put it back in.
Second.
Motion and a second to replace that. Can I ask for a show of hands? Does that work for you?
That's fine.
Okay. Let's have a show of hands if you support putting that back in. 1, 2, 3, 4. 8 to 1. Okay. Apply updated revenue adjustments. I don't think we need to take any action on that. Eliminate general memberships. We already approved that, correct?
I don't think we approved it, did we?
We asked that it be on.
We asked it be here for consideration. We didn't take any action on anything at the last meeting.
Let Bird City back in.
I don't,
The nature preserve will pay for that.
I don't care so much about leaving Wisconsin municipalities, but I do think it's reasonable to have our city administrator in the Rotary Club.
I would
I think
agree.
it's critical.
I would agree.
I mean,
I would
the
propose not
organization
doing
has
that.
given this city so much money
Precisely.
over the years and continues to do so and continues to volunteer in so many different ways. And we're saying we can't send our city administrator to maintain that relationship? That seems really short-sighted.
That's my rub with it, yes.
I would struggle with the disconnect between the city and the community, and I think the city administrator being involved in two particular groups, one being the Rotary, the other one being the Chamber, are two critical groups to keep them connected with the community. Rotary's provided, as Alderman Bouquet's indicated, an excellent volunteer source. We've got Rotary Park as a result of it. We've got the Riverwalk improvements as a result of it. And being in direct contact with the city administrator or a city representative on this to know what the city needs and requests are is a real critical component. We have an offer in the budget of $100,000 to go towards Gateway, if I remember correctly. That letter came in, and we're going to balk at $765 of, $100,000 we don't have to spend on Gateway features.
Do you participate? Okay.
Yeah, he does.
I mean, if he wasn't, then this is a good question.
Not to the full extent, but yes, I participate.
I just think those two are critical. Bird City's $100. I mean, seriously,
That's not critical.
it's not.
Rotary membership
Make
is
a
critical.
contribution.
Rotary membership is critical. I don't agree with that.
If we would have nickel and dime the public service building the way we're nickel
Okay, I'd
and diming
move
this budget,
I'll
I think
move
we'd
to
be further
include the
ahead.
Rotary membership, and if that includes chamber membership as well? It does, okay, so I would move that we include Rotary and chamber membership.
Second.
Motion and a second. If you support that, raise your hand.
yes.
6 to 3. That passes. Eliminate 2017 capital spending on roadway lighting replacement, $10,000.
Somebody explain that one?
Pardon me?
Somebody give us a description of, is this an important current capital improvement or important current replacement or
I'm curious if it increases energy efficiency.
is that the reason for it? I'm just wondering what it was in there for in the first place.
We could use it to upgrade for energy efficiency. We spend over $100,000 a year in the energy costs for roadway lighting, and that's just on the roadway lighting that we own. That doesn't include, obviously, any of those owned by other agencies. So in the absence of this, we wouldn't really even be able to consider any upgrades for energy efficiency. But frankly, at $10,000, that's really just replacement as the aging infrastructure either falls apart or rusts through or otherwise requires replacing.
So we'll have no money to replace light bulbs when they burn out?
It's not so much the bulbs as much as it's the poles themselves. We have a lot of steel poles in the business park, Port Road, and they're literally falling over. So we actually take them out and replace the bases and have them rebuilt, and that's what we're using this for.
We would also welcome additional funding to be able to do energy efficiency, because that would certainly pay back in the long run.
Is this a capital improvement that should be part of the capital improvement plan, or is this something, you know?
Meaning the study, I mean, we as staff can move forward with pursuing options for energy efficiency. I mean, we have a defined number of streetlights, so it's not as though we need to do analysis beyond looking at the retrofitting of the fixtures that we'd have to do to be able to put in. I mean, obviously, we'd have to have some consideration of what type of lighting you'd want to do. LED is more expensive than, you know, some of the other energy efficiency options. Not everybody likes the quality of light of some of the new higher efficiency, so we'd certainly need conversations, but this $10,000 does not include any of that.
This is simply to replace
Yes.
poles that are deteriorating and falling over.
Correct.
I move we restore $10,000 to the roadway lighting replacement program.
Is there a second?
I'll second it so we can at least know that.
There's a second.
Should we be doing that before we've done the analysis of what we want to do as far as
In the absence.
higher, you know, higher efficiency lighting or whatever? I mean, you hate to see us go and replace a bunch of poles and lights and then turn around 6 months later and say, that's not the high efficiency lighting that we wanted to install.
Well, if the pole falls down and you don't have money to replace it, then you're missing a light pole.
Correct.
That's a little different than replacing, replacing the fixtures.
Well, is that
Efficiency.
I think this is
the
just
reality?
maintenance and
How'd this
repair.
come out then? If you're not going to not replace light poles, or was that really the plan, that we just
This isn't bulbs,
cap
this
off
is
the
poles.
And the structure.
the stub and wait until someday there was money? What was the thought here in taking this out?
Meeting the objective.
Beyond that,
I'll be honest with you, we don't necessarily recommend cutting all of this out of the budget. And I think we probably.
But how come this didn't make this list? That's what I'm kind of wondering. The light poles. You know, as we walk through these, I'm wondering how some things made the, oh, it is on here. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
it is.
Okay.
On there.
It's on your list and his.
Yeah, okay.
I think what Director Lundin is indicating is $10,000 for 2017 will give you an amount of money to make repairs as needed.
I misunderstood.
Get you through the year.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to restore the $10,000. Raise your hand if you support that. 4, 6, 7 to 2. It passes. Eliminate 2017 capital spending on bike lane construction.
Eliminate it.
Pardon?
Eliminate it.
That's what it says, eliminate.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good. Bye-bye.
Not your favorite item, is it?
It's luxury.
Is this new?
I don't
or
agree
is
with
this?
that statement, but
I agree with that statement.
It is not
the bike in
new.
the city in the last
The-
10 years? Has anyone?
Yeah,
Pardon?
I have in the last
Let's go.
month.
Been run over by the guys.
This is the money that pays for the little shoulders when we repave the roads.
Correct.
Correct.
Either that, or if the city has an approved 2030 plan for bike and pedestrian that identifies goals and objectives and specific projects, the funding request is $100,000 annually. What was originally in the budget was $10,000.
And we could, when we repave a road, just make it wider and put the stripe there anyway.
Well, if there's two items associated with the elimination of the 2017 funding, and then further down the list is the elimination of the account balance. And if both of those are eliminated, then with every road project where a bike facility would be proposed, we would have to come through Public Works and Common Council to have you formally agree to use your road program funding for bike lane construction.
I'll agree to it every time. I'm going to make a motion that, per Alderman Worth's statement, to prepare a plan to be reviewed by Public Works Committee before
There.
next budget.
There is one. You have an adopted 2030 plan with all of that in it.
Okay.
I just don't know where
So
this
why are we-
$10,000 is going. I mean, we have a plan that's this long-term plan, but I'm for thinking
So when we do a
short-term
road
plan.
project, we pay for it out of two accounts. We pay for the road out of the road program, and we pay for the bike lanes out of the bike lane account.
Why can't we just pay for it all out of the roads program? And just assume that we're gonna put bike lanes based
We
on our
have
city
to ask you to
mission.
do so, because the road program funding is for roads, not for bike lanes. But if you approve that with each individual project, then it can be.
Then your road program will come back at 1.75 million a year instead of
Correct, so our
1.7
request will
million a
go
year.
from 1.7 to 1.8.
Does our long-term plan incorporate the restoration of the lanes we've already built? Because that's my worry on the whole bike path thing.
For the off-road paths?
Yeah, the off-road paths, the interconnecting paths.
It's also
There's a bunch
frankly
of-
when you reconstruct the road.
What?
Also for pedestrians.
Whatever they're for. I just, sooner or later, that whole bill, is gonna come to roost, that those start getting old.
No, these accounts are for construction, not for maintenance. So
Okay.
once it's constructed, it falls under the city's operational expenses to continue to maintain.
No, I was just asking a separate question. Do we have a plan for the reconstruction? Okay.
I think as we look at our town center mission to have a bike and pedestrian friendly center of our city, yet we're looking to eliminate bike lanes to get to that center of our city as the road construction comes up. I think we're defeating our own purpose in that. Mequon is a very well spread out community. You have a large contingency of bicyclists that prefer to ride on a bike lane versus getting run over. And I think getting from point A to point B, as we try to become and try to promote a bike-friendly community, which we have less wear and tear, we have less fuel that we're using, so on and so forth, I think it's an investment in the future. I would make a motion to add this back in. I'm a very strong proponent of bicycling. I think at very minimum, as you're looking at $10,000 in a budget, if a child is riding their bike to the town center to meet their friends, if they have a safer passage to get there for 10 grand, I'll invest taxpayer money on that, and I can support that 110%. So my motion is to add that back in.
Second.
Motion and a second to add back in $10,000.
I have a comment before we vote. The bike lanes, first of all, they're 4-foot lanes attached to a road, and they're on our bigger roads. They're the ones that I think come up about every mile. And I would not encourage too many children to do that with the type of traffic that's going by. So I'm not always convinced it's a safer situation. I think it's a good situation for an adult that's like some of us that don't ride the lanes too much, because frankly, the professional bike riders, they're not going to use that anyway. They just, that's my biggest complaint in my district, I think, is when there's 4 or 5 riders abreast and they're going down Lakeshore. And I'd rather see,
Agreed on.
I don't necessarily want to quit the program. I don't want to get a false sense of security either. But I'd rather see it go with the road projects and have it come from our major road budget, because frankly, we get good interest rates on that debt right now. And I'd rather look at it that way, and that way people are paying into the future with those bike lanes. So I'd rather see it wrapped up with our road budget.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to add $10,000 back in. Raise your hand if you support that. Still fails. Eliminate the salaries and benefits for 3 council members effective April 19th, 2017, and the mayor's cell phone.
I would have a question about that, because obviously the legal opinion is clear that we can't eliminate the salaries we can't modify the salaries and benefits of sitting aldermen. But, so this is only going to apply to the people who are elected next spring.
Assuming they're new.
Does this
Right?
council,
No?
is this council then anticipating doing the same thing for the next 3 years, so that over a 3-year period, there will be no, ultimately, there will be no salaries at all for aldermen?
Funny to laugh, but it'd be kind of funny not to.
You have to pass a resolution, correct?
Resolution ordinance, I don't know how it was adopted, however it was originally adopted, it would be the same, so it was a resolution.
replaced.
With each election period, the new folks coming in with that election.
There's no reason to tie the mayor and the alderman together, right?
What's that?
You said the alderman and the mayor, but there's no necessity of tying the two together, right?
Correct.
Okay, I mean, I wouldn't propose doing it for the mayor, I would propose doing it for us.
The mayor's not included in this. Like,
Or your cell phone.
But we would have to pass that legislation next month for it to be effective beginning next year. And then the next year, another 3 aldermen it would apply to them, and the following year, it would apply to the other 3 aldermen. And I was here when we raised the alderman pay from 200 to 400, and the same thing happened. We did it all at once, so some people were getting paid more than others.
For a
But,
period of time.
For the next 2 years. But
And under such a scenario, we would accrue additional savings into next year's budget and even the 2019 budget. So you would see savings in 2017, additional savings in 2018, and then final additional savings in 2019.
It's my plan that if we do it for the 3 seats, that at the same time, I'll either do my donation back or reduce mine intentionally, because I don't think we should be getting paid in the first place. But I want to get an answer on what the tax ramifications are, because I don't want to be paying taxes on income I'm not getting.
no, we would pass an ordinance
But I'd do it-
eliminating all alderman salaries, but it would not take effect. It would take
And I'm just
effect.
saying I'd make it take effect for me earlier. You can voluntarily do that in the,
Yeah, if you want.
What's the driver on this? Is this budget? I mean, really?
It's John Worth.
I mean, really?
No,
I mean,
it's a budget, it's a big budget item each year. Wouldn't you rather be seeing bike paths or I'd rather see cameras at Port Washington Road. We're supposed to be public servants. Our planning commission spends a lot of time, our Board of Education spends a lot of time. They don't get paid. We do. Why?
Yeah, but they don't represent.
But we're expected to also serve on those boards as well, and we don't get
No,
paid
we
for
don't.
those boards either. I struggle with the quality of individual, I mean, this is a pittance. We all agree it's a pittance amount each month, but it does afford certain ability to take a day off if you need to take a day off, or if you need to take a day unpaid to hire a city administrator. And that process was a 3-day thing where, we took vacation to do that. And, John, you're doing an excellent job of communication in your district. I think you probably have the lead on communication in your district. You've got a great email list. But others have done distributions via printed mail and things like that. This goes into that. It goes into, direct communication with the public. It goes into availability on time to do your job in the office. I
would just say the school board does the same thing, and they don't get paid.
Alderman Gero.
Since this will directly affect myself and Alderman Mayor if he chooses to run, and I know Connie's not going to run, what I wanted to say is that I'll go along with this. I'll cut my salary as long as we balance a budget that doesn't increase taxes this year.
The total all-in cost for eliminating the salaries and the payroll taxes for 8 aldermen is $41,340
Every year.
every year.
It's a part-time employee at the city.
But we won't realize that, the city won't realize that
Not
for
until
3
the third
years.
Totally for 9 years, right?
No, 3 years.
I'd rather see quality people when I'm long gone from the seat. If somebody's motivated to run, or we have
People are running for
candidates
$4,800, they're the wrong people.
We can say that sitting from your
I'll
seat,
say
but I
this.
don't think it's fair to say that for everybody else.
It's hard enough to make the time commitment to come here every month for a lot of people, and it's a barrier for entry for a lot of people. I've personally used the little bit I get paid to hire babysitters many a time to be able to be here. It costs money. It's the only reason I carry a landline in my house is so there's a phone number someone can call for city-related business. Otherwise, it'd be all on my cell phone. God, if we're this desperate, we're in deep trouble. I mean, can I live without it? It won't hurt me at all. I can afford not to have it, but You want people to run, you want younger people up here. It's a thing. They've got kids, dual income. My wife works plenty of evenings in her job. And at least 3-4 times a year, I'm hiring sitters to be here to do this.
Mr. Cameraman.
Yeah, I just want to make a remark. The Mequon Deansville School Board is one of very, very few boards that don't get paid. The overall majority of school boards do pay their people to do that. Mequon is very rare that they don't. So use that as an example for everybody. It's not.
Is there a motion on this item?
I will move to put it back in.
I'll second the
I
motion.
think that
Those comments are
Alderman
comments.
Nervin and Strelchek have made a really good point. If we want to encourage particularly younger citizens of our community to run, they may not have the resources to be able to pay the babysitter and to do the kinds of, to take time off when we have extra meetings, daytime meetings, as we have had in the last couple of years. We've had to set aside days, and if we want quality people to run, and it's not a matter of quality. I think it's a matter of fairness to working people. If we want working people to participate in government, then I think we should support them with the little stipend that we do provide. So I move we put that, restore that money.
For a second?
Right over there.
Second.
Alderman Adams?
Well, I'll tell you, I want someone that's running with passion for this community, and that's why they want the spot, and that money doesn't enter in the decision. You know, I've been involved in many things, such as the Junior League of Milwaukee, the Visiting Nurses Association. They're not paying my babysitting time and things. So I'm happy to cut this money in the spirit of keeping a no increase budget.
Support restoring this money, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Passes. Okay, moving on to page 2. Eliminate capital project account balance to fund local drainage projects, $15,000. This is money that's already been budgeted and set aside. This is not a new appropriation. This is money that's...
And I will just note, it's been in place for over 18 months and no one has requested to utilize it. I'm fine with it being left out.
All right, moving on. Reduce capital project account balance
Not a local one.
for funding Munis IT implementation projects, $20,000.
So we're not restoring the local drainage projects fund?
Just local, not major and secondary, just local. No one's requested the funding.
What was it? No one's requested.
Just local. No one has requested the funding. Technically, the drainage policy does not fund local projects, but we were having requests come through Public Works Committee and getting the direction to complete the projects. So we requested funding for it, but since establishing the funding, no one has come forward to request it. So we had spoken earlier at the drainage CIP meeting about the potential of rolling that into the major and secondary program, but in the absence of that, negating the fund balance won't appear to affect anyone since no one has requested the funding.
Hasn't that, or maybe I'm wrong, wasn't that historically where we did ditching in areas that had water problems that weren't, you know, where the road wasn't ready for ditching, but a neighborhood had issues because of ditches that had filled in or whatever, that's where we had...
No, the drainage policy defines 3 different types of drainage issues: local, major, and secondary, and that's dependent on the watershed that contributes to the drainage issue. The policy states that local drainage funds are the responsibility of the private homeowners and not of the city. So up until 2 years ago, those projects were not being funded by the city, and the city was directing the individuals to take care of those drainage issues by themselves. The issue rose when there was the potential of needing neighbors to work together on a drainage project, albeit on private property, and neighbors were having issues coming to terms with each other, so they were requesting that the city intervene to fix the drainage project, or where they were having trouble getting economies of scale to be able to get a contractor to come out to fix their drainage issue, and the city either, could do a contract or complete the effort themselves. So since the drainage policy says that we would not be funding those projects, but we were being mandated to do them anyway, we wanted to create a funding source.
Okay.
So we created that funding source, but since implementing that funding source, we've gone through 2 CIP schedules, and no one has requested the funding.
It's fine, I don't think we should be doing drainage anyhow.
Okay, we're on the Munis IT implementation. You want to review what that's accomplishing?
How will that affect our plans for maintaining and improving our computerized systems?
Well, that money is for basically hanging new modules onto our existing modules that we already do. The biggest project we've got going right now is for the conversion to permits and inspections in the planning department. The reduced amount would still allow that to go forward, but reduces monies that we could be using for other projects.
Okay, so we are continuing,
This doesn't affect you.
we have sufficient budgeted funds to do what we committed to do.
Right. There's other projects. We're still running, we're tracking some things on our legacy accounting system from the 1990s because we need to make that conversion. We haven't had a chance to do that yet. So this would just reduce or defer other projects besides permits.
So we're lengthening out the amount of time it's going to take to fully implement. I just wonder what operational efficiencies we're giving up by not having everyone on the same platform sooner. I think that was the whole impetus for Munis, right? We just all talking the same language.
Right.
We currently have just shy of $90,000 in that account for project implementation relative to software and programs. This would take the funding amount down to $70,000.
Is that enough to get to where we need to go, I guess? If we're fine with the 70 and we won't just come back and...
In most respects, yes.
It'll address the biggest priority we have right now. And we can always talk about this again a year from now.
I'm fine bringing it back up in the spirit of moving this forward. I just don't want to cut short the effort and end up regretting it 2-3 years from now.
Okay, moving on. Reduce capital spending for police vehicle replacement from $100,000 to $80,000, reduction of $20,000. Alderman Meyer.
Chief, what does that put you back then in replacement time frame then, that happened?
Well, we're currently switching over all of our marked squads right now, the ones you see with the decals and light bars. So after that's done, we're going to be left with about $12,000 in our account. So we try and spread it out over the years. We still have all kinds of other cars besides the marked ones that we have to plan for. So we try to spread it out each year so one year doesn't have a big hit. We couldn't avoid it this year because we were switching from the Impalas to the SUVs. But for next year...
So in a normal year you use how much?
Well, it all depends which ones we're replacing. I mean, we just replaced 9 of them at about $28,000 a piece plus all the equipment, so it's over $300,000. Next year, we're looking at probably 2 or 3 that we have to replace, and then probably 2 or 3 each year until that third year when we replace all the marked ones again because they get the most use. we're just trying to have enough in there that we don't have these huge spikes every two or 3 years.
And this is the money you set aside to rebuild that fund? So this is really an annual expense, right?
Correct.
So
So
this
it's
year,
gonna
we're
lengthen out the
depleting the
timeframe
fund.
effectively.
Well, we're replacing units, but the fund will be depleted to $12,000.
Right.
So then when we have to replace additional ones in the next 2 to 3 years,
Well,
it's gonna spike and.
We replace some each year, but the marked ones average about every 2.5 or 3 years because they're used 24/7. We do all of them every 2.5 or 3 years.
And if we maintain a practice of setting aside $100,000 a year, we avoid peaks in the budgeting process going forward.
That's the goal, yeah.
More so than if we only put 80.
So at the end of this year, put it back in, you'd have 92,000 is what you're saying?
No, he's going to buy some vehicles this year, too.
We just bought all of them. We're in the process of switching them, but next year we have 2 or 3 more to buy. But by the end of this year, we're going to be down to 12,000.
So you will have 3 in 2017 also. So they need at least the 80.
Yeah.
Yeah, they need that.
And then once you do that, then in 18, we're back. If we don't plan ahead, we get those spikes.
This is where I get a little nervous. We're using fund balance to balance the budget, and that's all well and good, but we rely on having sufficient funds in these sinking funds to cover those big ticket items. If we're not funding the sinking funds adequately and we're using fund reserves from the general fund, we're kind of burning the candle at both ends. So I'll make a motion to throw this back in.
Second.
Motion and a second to restore 20,000 to the police vehicle replacement fund. If you support that, raise your hand. 7 to 2. That's back in. Eliminate capital project account balance to fund bike lane construction. 23,664. That's the money we already have in the bank to fund bike lane construction.
That doesn't.
If we're not going to fund it with 10 grand every year to build it up, why keep it? I mean, I voted for your motion to keep it.
I'm going to make a motion to add that back in. If I get shot down on principle, that's fine. If I get outvoted and I get a second, that's great too. But I'm making the motion on principle to add that back in.
I'll second that. You support that? Raise your hand.
Is that a yes or a no?
No, it's 4.
That's a no.
Yeah.
Eliminate funding to stripe Cedarburg Road, $25,000.
I moved to add that back in. 25 seems heavy. I know striping is expensive, but it does
Yeah.
kind of surprise me that it's that expensive. But if one of our concerns is parking for the town center right now, I find it hard to tell how far you can park on Cedarburg Road, where you can park. I'm assuming this includes the parking striping. And
Crosswalks.
I just think it's necessary.
I'm just kind of surprised that even that would be put inside of that way, because it's such a safety item inside of it too, that you would even consider eliminating that inside of it. Very surprised at that.
Yeah, so I'm moving to put it back in.
And I want to clarify, this is,
Second?
Yeah, I'll second it.
this is for the crosswalks too, for people to cross?
Yeah.
Correct.
It's getting dangerous.
In front of City Hall too.
Expensive.
Does that include in front of City Hall?
We're,
Well, parking.
we're happy to bring specifics back forward, but this is based upon a quote we had to do this year.
I think it's expensive because you have to use some special epoxy paint because of the
It is
fancy
special
surface
epoxy
we put
paint,
out
and you'd
there.
have to detour all the traffic.
Don't say we. You weren't here.
I wasn't here.
voted no, so I'm not taking any,
I know.
that was it.
All right, we have a motion to add that back in. If you support that, raise your hand. 8-1, that passes. Reduce estimated Affordable Care Act allocation for the fire department. I believe that was already explained. Reduce 2017 capital spending for fire vehicle replacement from 95,000 to 50,000. Cut of 45,000.
Isn't this the same issue that we have with the police vehicles? That we fund a fund so that we don't suddenly end up with a $200,000 or $300,000
Correct.
hit when we have to replace something big.
Except his vehicles cost as much as 9 of his vehicles.
He doesn't have as many though.
I believe the
They
next
last
big
longer,
one is due in 2020. It'll be 30 years old. It's a tanker truck, so I guess you just hold on to it for 31 years instead of 30 years. So,
I'll move to put it back in. And I just think sinking funds for,
motion and a second to restore. If you support that, raise your hand. 4, 5, 6. 6-3, it passes. Reduce 2017 capital spending for public works vehicle replacement from 300,000 to 250,000. $50,000 cut. This is the same type of subject.
Same thing, we have $7 million worth of equipment. Every year we lay out a 5-year plan. Even the 300,000 isn't meeting what we're projecting we need to replace. These plow trucks are $165,000 a piece. We have other old equipment that's more than that. We're keeping them almost 20 years now, and when we sell them, we're getting about 12 or 13,000. Other communities are turning those over in 10 years. They're getting 50. You kind of do the math. I mean, you lose a transmission on an old truck and you're 13,000. You just put 8 or 9 into a repair. So 300 would be more beneficial than a lesser amount.
Move to restore $50,000 to the Public Works Vehicle Replacement Fund.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second, Alderman Worth.
I had a different view on Public Works, maybe a little bit than the safety departments. And maybe they could have had a consistent view, I'm not sure. But I think that there's a lot of Public Works capital improvements that we're going to need to look at through that capital improvement plan. And that's why, at least what I proposed here, was to create a capital reserve account rather than going item by item that's going to be there for making some of those decisions on, whether it goes to the Public Works Department or whether it goes to restoring the building or where dollars go. And I also think that one of the things we're going to have to look at is Alderman Meyer's proposal that when we go to borrow for roads this year, if that's what we end up doing, that we also look at borrowing for some of the long-term capital improvements. Maybe fire is a little bit more that way. The police department churns through their vehicles. But, the longer-term vehicles really make sense, are more appropriate for borrowing than cars that are going to last 3 years. And that's why I thought Public Works, maybe we don't restore this funding, but we look at it in connection with borrowing or any sort of just general capital reserve account we create. So I'm not saying no, that we shouldn't have the money there, or we're not going to need to replace equipment. We are. But I think that we're going to have to do that, I think, in a more, after taking a more global look at what the capital needs are. That's why on my chart I didn't add it. I did add it back in, but.
All right, if you support adding the 50,000 back in, raise your hand.
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter which one I count.
6-3, that passes. Apply additional fund balance, add another 50,000 from fund balance. That was recommended by staff. Unless I hear an objection, I'll do that. Eliminate 2017 capital spending to remove ash trees on public property. $80,000.
So we're just gonna leave dead ash trees standing.
They won't stand.
They won't stay.
They won't
They won't,
stand.
they won't stand.
Does this pay for the tree services that,
Yeah, right now we have a forestry division of 1 employee, and so we cannot address the 27,000 ash trees that there are in the city that are dead or dying. And so the money would help us contract mass removals. It's also been utilized in more dense subdivisions so that we can offer the contractor services to the residents so that they could take an account for our cost effectiveness of having the contractor to direct contract for the removal of ash trees on their private property at a scale that they might not otherwise be able to reach themselves.
that doesn't cost us?
That doesn't cost us anything. We're not paying for it. We're not the conduit. We're not the administrators. It's just bringing the contractor there at a scale where they're already removing a significant amount of trees where the private property owners can take advantage of that cost.
So it does two things. It not only clears our public right-of-way of ash trees, but it provides an opportunity for our citizens to tap into that contractor while he's there.
Yes.
And do it at a lesser expense than hauling somebody out there on their own.
And the other complication that we are going to reach all too soon is how we remove ash trees in parks, where we cannot reach them with traditional tree removal equipment.
We're not just removing dead trees, right?
No.
When we're doing subdivisions,
Well, no.
we're removing all the ash trees that are in the
Well, right now,
right-of-way.
all the Common Council approved us to do is remove ash trees with routine tree operations and the road program. So that's all we're doing right now.
But that's a pretty big part of it, the road program, right?
Well, it depends on how many ash trees are along the roads.
I think people are.
We're removing them at hundreds a year. They will all be dead within 5 to 7 years. And we will have
20,000.
thousands left that we won't have been able to get to yet.
I think the people of this city are going to expect us to be removing ash trees. So I would move we restore that $80,000.
I do want to note that we would be happy to bring the discussion back to have the council formalize a policy if that's what they're looking for. But right now, it's associated with the road program and routine tree operations.
I think one of the problems that we have, if there's a dangerous tree, it's dead, it's going to fall down, but it's tall, our crews can't remove it.
Correct, and actually the...
Specialists to remove it. So I don't know how many cases like that there are, but we do need to be able to pay for a specialist to remove a dangerous tree that's still standing. If it falls down,
Then we just
we
clean
can
it up.
chop it up.
Well, that's why I was suggesting restoring half the money, because I do think that there are times where we have to remove trees, but I don't know that we need to restore the whole amount, and I do think we ought to have a policy before we're spending $80,000 each and every year. I frankly, they're not, it takes, I've had trees in my yard that I've removed. It takes 3 or 4 or 5 years from the time they start dying to the time, at least 2 or 3 years before they're looking unsightly. 5 years before they die. And there are a lot of trees that aren't affected at all that are getting cut down. I'm just not, I understand why we're doing it, but I think that we're spending more money than we need to, earlier than we need to, by removing trees as we go through a subdivision. And I'll tell you, we're not necessarily making that subdivision happy, because we're not replacing the trees always.
We are replacing them on a one-to-one basis, just not necessarily in the
there.
same location. Correct.
The people in Huntington Park don't care if you put them on Donjas Bay Road. If you're taking the trees out of Huntington Park, they'd like a tree put back where you took it down. One-to-one basis, who cares?
Well, right now, then they can participate in the city's tree replacement program.
Yeah, you take their tree away that they paid for, and then they have to pay to put a new one up.
It's a good deal.
No, it's not.
I mean, I've had a number of them in my areas and having them taken down, and it's nice the city took them down, and that's what I've had a number of complaints on the results afterwards and that from it. Some of the reseeding, some of the stuff that's being done inside of there for it. I'd probably go for restoring half of it. I wouldn't go for the full amount.
That's my motion, to restore half.
Motion to restore half, a second?
The second.
Second. Any discussion of that? Motion to restore half of that funding, raise your hand.
So my motion for 80,000 didn't get a second, is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
That passes 6-3. Half. And eliminate capital project account balance to fund city parking lot improvements, $130,000. That's money we already have set aside.
Mr. Mayor, I just got a quick question on that last item. Did that motion also include the directive to bring that back for a policy discussion so we can revisit this? I mean, that was made.
We're going to do that anyway, so that's fine.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure that we're still addressing the issue.
Parking lot. Desperately need to fix that parking lot.
I'll make a motion to maintain it. What are we gonna do with this thing we have here, the parking lot? It desperately needs to have something done with it in the near future. You eliminate the funds and you're gonna have to start from scratch to pay for it. It's just, it'll go out this year and come back another year. It's just a nut and shell game.
Motion to restore, is there a second? I'll second that. Alderman Meyer?
Well, I think we've got some RFPs coming in for some of this area. I think some of that can be covered by the developers that may be coming in doing some stuff. I think we should really go back to the town center and get them to, if it's all possible for us to do that, get them to continue to help inside of this project a little bit also. Just because of the fact that the increase in traffic here has probably increased dramatically from what we had beforehand. And that's being used now as an access way, an entrance way for the town center. So I don't think the city should be the one that's going to be solely doing that. Now, I may be wrong, and they may be participating already, but I think there should be some participation on their part with that.
Well, having recently looked at the agreement with them, I don't think we can. We have an obligation to maintain our parking lot. They have an obligation to maintain theirs, and we have cross easements. At least that's the way it's written. I don't know how you get them to just voluntarily throw $75,000 to satisfy our obligations under the. I mean, that mistake was made 4 or 5 years ago, or 3 or 4 years ago, or whenever it was that we approved the agreements with the town center. I don't know how we do that.
I know it seems like we've had a lot of agreements with a lot of different places and reopened them, and it's at least worth a try to go back into.
I think it's reasonable to revisit. I think with the RFP on Logaman and then redoing that parking lot, if there is any construction that goes on there, I'm okay with it being out of the budget this year, but definitely would like to see, it needs to be done. Moving it from the budget this year doesn't deny the fact that it needs to be done.
But this is sweeping money out that's already set aside for it. This isn't reducing the payment for it.
Yeah.
So you just.
There's no proposed 17 funding. This will take the balance in the account.
And Kristen, clarify if you would.
So we're spending our savings.
Correct.
This is not enough money to do.
The City Hall parking lot, it is not. And the Logaman parking lot is considered separate, just for clarification. So if we were to retain that property and need to do that parking lot, that's in addition to the cost of the City Hall parking lot.
And this money would supposedly be used for all city parking lots.
Correct. It's not necessarily designated. City Hall was the priority, but this is for all city-owned parking lots. Library, pool, City Hall, public safety, East Side Fire Station, the brush site, Logaman, and the pool.
I'm just going to bring up a statement. I mean, this is kind of a policy discussion at budget while we're trying to go through the budget. And I think what we're struggling with as a council here is that I sure would have liked to have seen this go through committee before it hit budget at year end. And we're trying to establish the budget for next year. I mean, how are we going to account for it? What's the policy and how we're going to approach it with the RFP coming up? There's definitely a committee that, that could be going through this. The 130, I mean, to eliminate an account to replace a parking lot that probably needs to be replaced, I don't see that as being feasible or reasonable, you know? If it's in ill repair, it needs to be replaced so that people don't get injured using city property. But if we do have an RFP out there, or, you know, and Logoman is something that we're entertaining, maybe selling that building, it could come with a parking lot agreement that could pay this amount or a huge portion of it or whatever. So again, kind of in the gray zone of knowing how to proceed. I don't like eliminating an account balance and using it to balance the budget when we know we're going to need some funds moving forward.
I think I just heard.
I'd like to make a couple of observations too. I sat through at least one planning commission meeting fairly recently where planners or commission members criticized local businesses for not wanting to resurface their parking lot. And we have no program for resurfacing parking lots or even finishing putting a surface on lots like Rotary Park. Never got a final coat on it. So we're a little hypocritical as a city government if we're asking the people of our community to maintain a standard we aren't willing to maintain in our city properties. And you know, there may be a policy discussion here, but at least a couple of years in a row now, I've listened to members of our council suggest that there are things we shouldn't be talking about at budget time because it requires a policy discussion. And then at a committee level, hearing somebody say, well, this isn't an issue that should come before us now because it's a budget issue. So we're kind of jerking staff around. And I don't think it's wise to be eliminating an account balance when we're going to need the money to do things for our own parking lots.
What's the estimated total of resurfacing that parking lot as it stands today?
City Hall alone, not including Logoman, $300,000.
City Hall alone, 300,000.
I
For all
can
our
also,
parking lots?
Not including
Just the
Logoman.
City Hall parking lot.
What is it for all of our parking lots?
All of the parking lots?
It's not enough to do this one. Kim would like to say something.
Well, I would just add that Civic Campus parking was an eligible expense in the Town Center TIF district. Obviously, like some of these other expenditure line items from the TIF, we've shifted those dollars, allocated them for incentives. In my memo, and I think at the Town Center workshop, we talked about being able to forecast when we might have some additional dollars to be able to utilize as part of the TIF, and when that might come on board and some prioritizations of that. That's still a few years out, but I just wanted to make sure, we clarify that it doesn't necessarily have to come from a capital, improvement project.
So you could fund it with increment once that starts flowing.
I mean, I think
Just
again, that's a
potentially.
policy decision. That's only one component of this overall fund, obviously.
Alderman Meyer, in answer to your question, it's $822,000, but just to clarify, that's just for city parking lots, that doesn't include parks.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to add back the 130 for parking lot improvements.
One more. I think this type of dollar amount, and when we're looking at doing, parking lots that have a life expectancy of another 20 years, that should be part of long-term borrowing. It should be something decided so that most of these projects now, when you take a look at the condition of them, they're in need of it. At the present time, it's not that they're something that we add in $80,000 a year and hope for another 10 years that they're going to last with patching and that stuff. It's something if we're looking at, during this coming year for maintenance projects on the buildings for major stuff, it's something that we should be looking at in borrowing also just to get these projects done. and then over the long term, pay for them because it's a long-term use. It's not something, and trying to continually fund these things on a yearly basis, when it is for something that's going to be for long-term use, I think it's just going to, it's what it does is that it kind of blows the budget up each time you try to do it, so.
But everything we do is on a long-term basis.
Not necessarily so.
So why don't we just borrow half of our budget every year and just
Borrow the
add
whole
the debt service?
Well, we
Kind of
don't
be
do
like the
that.
federal government.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. If you support adding it back, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3.
I'm torn.
4, 5, 6. Passes. Okay.
Talk against it, you vote for
Okay, Mr. Watson can tell us what we've just done.
All right, so we've got the scorecard on the screen, up to 565. Approved one way or another, about $343,000 worth of add backs. Question for the committee now is, how do you want to fund it, whether it be tax levy or fund balance?
How much did we add back?
Well,
then we have-
207,000.
343.
but we haven't gone through the supplemental resource requirements identified
Right.
since September 20th.
Correct.
So why are we making this decision now?
Would you say 343?
Yes, I'm asking for clarification if we're going to fund these with tax levy or fund balance.
Well, but why do you separate these from the other ones?
The
Shouldn't we go through
136.
all of them and then talk about how we're going to
At
pay
some
for
point,
them?
I'd like to circle back to this, though.
Yeah, well, of course we need
Oh,
to.
absolutely.
Well, just so you know where we're at, we just added back $343,000, which
Right.
I think it's
equates to
reasonable.
like 7 cents on the tax.
Unless we do some fund balance,
Right.
because it's about $45,000
How much would it be if,
per penny.
Almost
What was
8
the
cents.
tax levy? Is it 3.05?
Almost 8 cents added to the tax rate
8 cents?
by what we've done here.
If you added it all back to the tax levy. And you
If we add it all back to the
fund
tax
balance.
levy.
So I think, I already see some of the items being split out by what's year-over-year borrow, or year-over-year savings to fund long-term things and
I
what are
just-
one-time
I
events,
just
so.
guesstimated
Yeah.
discussion, but we'll have to go back and revisit these at some point tonight.
Okay, so you know where we are, and there's another page in the yellow memo of the Christmas list. I would just bring up one item. Is it in here? Yes. Town Center Gateway project. Now, we sort of committed to that 10 or 15 years ago. That was an integral part of town center planning, was that park and that gateway feature. And I feel we have an obligation to complete that. Everybody else is building their stuff and contributing their money, and that's one of the things that we promised to do. And we have people that want to donate money to help get it done, but we have to seed that account to get some money in there to get that started. So I would propose that we add $100,000 to the Gateway project. And I believe one thing that we could do is fund that with park and open space fees, because we're going to be getting a lot more park and open space fees with all the new dwelling units coming online.
Which isn't a source of revenue already budgeted in the budget, right?
Correct.
So I'll second your motion.
So I would say we put that in the budget, but it doesn't have a cost impact, because the revenue for it is already in the budget.
From all the new homes paying like $800.
If we don't get enough, we don't get enough. But at least we send the message that we're willing to do this if we have the money to pay for it from the park and open space money.
Well,
We don't add it in the budget.
Pardon?
We don't add it in the budget. We committed to doing that. I don't think we have that in the budget because we're just going to use funds from the,
Well, if you don't have the funds yet, I think you'll have to earmark them from the general fund, right? And then you could supplant that money with these fees as they come in.
this Gateway project may not even be this year, so.
just don't think we can create the account, say there's 100 grand in it, but there's nothing in
Everybody
it
else is running it.
until the money comes in.
Just for clarification, the Park and Open Space Fund is upside down about 271,000 right now from the purchase of the Weikert property a couple of years ago. So even though we're adding every day with each impact fee that comes in at $900, it's going to take a while to get that account to
So we
I
use
can't
that
hear you,
fund
I'm
to
sorry. So
purchase-
right now, we're in the negative in our,
About 270,000 based on the.
we're negative, 200.
We are looking to recoup some of that,
100.
correct?
Well, I mean,
In theory, we're looking to recoup some of that money?
In theory.
It depends on the resolution of the litigation.
Correct. But that's the object.
I agree with you. I'm still not sure that we increase general taxes for this. I think that it's an item that either if we can do it through, and it doesn't sound like we really can, forthcoming, but the other thing is we can look at that as because that's a long-term improvement also. I don't think we put it in this budget, but we send the signal that when we look at road borrowing or what have you, we'll do it then.
Well, we want to go out for the RFPs to design and construct at least phase one of that project. So without money in the budget, are we able to do that?
Well, how much is in
Yes,
the
we
impact
are.
fee, how much is in the impact fee fund now?
Negative $270,000. Negative.
Really?
We don't have the money.
308 homes.
308 homes at 90.
Bowling
I have
greens.
a question. Haven't there been at least two kind of proposals that have already come in?
Yes.
And why do we have to put out another RFP to design it again?
Oh, for the gateway? I thought you meant fueling the park impact fees with the next two town center development projects. No, there haven't been two proposals. We had one individual from the community come forward with a plan. And then I guess there is a concept plan as part of the JJR master plan for the Riverfront
So
Park.
this is a volunteer.
Yes.
A professional person.
Correct.
Who had a skill and presented something to us.
Correct.
Why can't we accept that?
Because the project value is high enough that we would have to go out for an RFP.
By law or?
All that was
The design for free, but
design.
wasn't going to do the construction for
The
free.
construction is what's expensive.
Should have told him that before he did the design.
So what's your motion
No,
suggesting we
he
do?
knew that. I mean,
Mayor?
no, he did. I mean,
did?
because part of the proposal was, I'm not going to give over my design for someone else to construct, and I can build into the construction costs, recouping some of those design services.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't think we approved that design.
No, we didn't.
We had
So what
several
we could
meetings
do
on
is
it.
We did not.
put $100,000 in the budget,
He's gonna
put
come back
$100,000
Because
in
we got hung fire on that exact
park and open
policy
space
discussion.
fees under the revenue side, which cancels each other, and if we don't get the money, then we don't spend the money.
That's consistent. My second is good on that,
Okay,
But, so if we don't get the money, we don't spend the money.
right?
right?
It's from the impact fees or the settlement.
So it's a placeholder so that people know that we're moving forward with the project.
Motion and second.
Works for me.
If you support that, raise your hand.
That in your spreadsheet.
Although 1, 8. Okay, anything else?
I have 3 of them that are on this list. The fire station sleeping quarters upgrades, I propose at least funding half of that now.
Second.
Restoring the police department training fund, it's $1,000. Seems like a place you don't want to cut $1,000.
Second that.
And the police officer, but it's contingent on ultimately, before we'd actually release those funds, having a view of overall staffing in the police department.
Okay,
Second.
let's do them one at a time. Fire station, sleeping quarters, $30,000.
Right.
Motion, second.
Somebody gave it. I thought it was-
I second it.
She
Connie seconded it.
Connie seconded it.
Discussion. If you support that, raise your hand. 7-2.
If you want to do it without,
I can just count you two guys over here. All right, the other one is $1,000.
Right.
The motion.
For training,
Second.
correct?
Yeah.
Can you say what it's for again?
Was for
Training.
Fire
Training.
Police,
training.
police,
Police
police.
training.
Police training.
Okay, if you support that, raise your hand. 8-1. What's the other one?
And the police officer.
Police officer.
Contingent.
No, I really don't think you should think about adding new personnel unless you actually have some data or some analysis that justifies that.
That was to actually just have the funding there, but I agree, we don't, and that was my whole concept, we don't actually fill the office until we've got the data. But if we get the data, then you have to wait an entire, 14 more months before you can actually fill the position.
So if you don't fill it, then you could spend it on the gateway feature.
Yeah, well, you put it in the general fund if you ultimately don't use the $92,000.
Does that 92, yeah, salary and benefits.
So you want to tax people with the possibility that
Well,
they may
94
use
because
it.
you got to buy a uniform.
no, I think that with the likelihood.
So that's a motion and you have a second?
Yes.
Motion and a second to add a police officer for $92,000. Discussion?
Because of the books, basically.
Alderman Garrell?
I find it a little ridiculous to be putting $92,000 away when you don't even know if you need something. I don't see it, like I said last time, the police in this community, we don't have a lot of crime. We don't have a lot of problems. It's almost like Mayberry at times. The police are outstanding. They're there when I call them. They're there when my neighbors call them. We don't have bullets flying around here. Yes, we do have a heroin problem, but that's not the police problem. To fund another $92,000 after the spending that we added, I said, I'm not going to vote for this. When we need it, I will vote for it.
And it will be too late.
Okay, if you support it, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Passes. Anything else?
That is contingent upon the study being done?
Yeah.
Correct?
How much is the study?
What? No,
Be staff directed.
it's a staff-directed study.
So you're thinking that
The only question I would have on the 92,000 on the dollar amount, not providing for the police officer, I believe that, but if $92,000 for salary and benefits is what it would take for a whole year, it is unlikely that we would get through the process and have a trained person available to us come January 1. So the question is, for this budget purpose, do we need 92,000?
Well, that's a good
You
question.
need at least half of it, probably, to do the study and have time to hire someone and get them on board.
That's what I would say.
It would give you that flexibility. And the benefit of maybe going outside and doing the study is it gives you a long-range blueprint for managing the largest department within the city. What's our total spend on police? Almost 6 million?
6 million.
5 million? 5 million? It's going to give you a blueprint moving forward on where we need to allocate our resources long-term so that we don't fall behind the curve in public safety. So maybe the full 92 makes sense and we hire, say, April. Or we hire, like we did this year with our communications supervisor in the police department and our building inspection supervisor, who actually just started a couple weeks ago. So the timing can work to our advantage.
Okay.
Well, first you have to do a study. Gather
I think
some
the money
data
would
and
be better spent on a study.
There's a lot of things to consider. Alderman Meyer?
I think, the vote's already there, but I mean, I think it would have been better to have monies put aside for a study to find out, instead of having a staff study done on to find out what we need to have inside of the police department.
But that's kind of what we just discussed. The
Why
the
not?
officer's
We're
probably
putting-
probably not going to show up until July or June or May, which means you're going to have less than $92,000 of
Already
actual
done the
cost.
study.
So you do a study with the first and then,
But you're assuming that we're gonna need to have one when you're, whatever. You're
Given
assuming
the
you're gonna
size
need
of
to
the
have an
city,
officer inside
we're
of it.
gonna need
If you're
that
assuming that,
officer.
why even have the study?
well, it's also, do we have the right number of sergeants? And I don't think we have any lieutenants, or I get mixed up between the two. And if you have the right number of detectives, it may be that you could reduce, I'm not saying this because I don't know, but you maybe reduce senior staffing and have 2 new officers for the same dollar amount.
This is amazing that suddenly we're going to do a study. I mean, this is, we talked earlier about policy. This is really policy discussion, and I don't think this is budget related. I think this should have been started a few months ago if we're going to do a study for something that's going to affect this budget. I mean, suddenly we're almost committing to a study.
Well, that is a budget issue.
Last
I
year,
mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't have one, but this isn't where the whole blood of the idea should come up. We can get it going here, and then we do it next year, and then we approach the position the next year.
I'd generally like to see a professional assessment of both police and fire. I think you've got the fire chief that's here each and every year. He's underfunded. We all know he's underfunded. He's putting together this fire department like a wizard every year. Police chief doing similar, at least he's got full-time paid people on staff. I think at very minimum, we should just get staff out of the middle of this one and do a professional study, as Will requested last year, as the fire chief has requested for multiple years, just to assess the department. So we're not having these policy discussions. You can take it to committee, you can discuss these things in committee, you can appropriately bring them forward, and then we can know where we want to go in budget. I support the chief, the officer on the street, adding that salary and benefits. I voted for it. Chief Groff, you know that I want to see another officer in the department. I would rescind my vote on adding the police officer in exchange for 2 professional studies to be done in our largest and most public safety-oriented departments in the city. To get staff a little bit out of the middle in between, this art show that's going on. We've got opinion A and opinion B. There's people that are paid to do this as long as, and staff, the burden's on you if we go with this to get a worthwhile study, not one that's just a bunch of fluff and reading 50 pages of it kind of is what we knew already. But really, a clear and deep assessment of what these departments need and are they appropriately set up for long-term planning. I don't know that any of us have the answers. We all have our opinions, and we're all legitimate in our thoughts. But we don't have the answers, and we don't have somebody trained in that field beyond the staff that we've got here telling us what we need, and they tell us every year that they're underfunded. And we write it off as a budget concern, and they just need a little bit more, and we're sufficing. I struggle with this decision every year. I want a safe community. Everyone here wants a safe community. Everyone outside this office wants a safe community. But I don't, we already voted on it. Can we?
I see where you're going, but
Can I make a motion to?
before you make that
change that?
motion, I'll bet you could fund both those studies if you slow rolled the hiring of a guy towards the latter half of the year. The studies are going to be 25 to 30 grand a piece. Reliably, that's where they always come in at. So you could do both those studies and hire a guy towards the end of the year for that 92K.
So then my motion would be to forego the hiring until at least 6 months into the year, based on 2 aldermen's discussion, and have the first half of that dollar amount go towards professional studies so that we're not guessing as city leaders.
Okay.
That's
I
my
think
motion.
that's clear. We'll send this to committee, and you can iron it out.
Okay.
Okay? else?
So that'll be an agenda item.
So where are we at?
$566 and $566,
Is the July one start or 100%?
I think.
It's $92,000 to do a study of our public safety services, and
hire.
plus, there's money there to fund partial year employee if that's what a study recommends.
Yes.
Can you say that again? You're very soft-spoken. What is 92,000?
To do studies of our public safety operations, staffing study of our public safety operations, with money left over to hire
Oh,
an additional
what we just
employee
talked about.
if necessary for 2017.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Where are we now?
Okay, so where we're at is, got two columns here, tax levy in the middle column, fund balance on the right-hand column. We're gonna be looking for consensus from the council committee on which is which. So, the first one was reducing, or putting back the police equipment capital project funding, $5,000. Right now, it's 5,000 for fund balance. I've worked off
We need to look at
Alderman
this as a
Brooks'
whole.
spreadsheet.
So why don't we just simplify this? What's the bottom line? It was
560.
343, now it's
468.
468, which is how much on the tax rate?
Sure, Tom, I get 566.
566 too.
Pardon?
I have 566.
Yeah, I have 566, 354. I've got a
I think
spreadsheet.
as the town center feature has a 0 in it, you might be carrying a 100 in there.
That's deal? Is that what we're adding?
Yeah, I'm not,
I got 460.
I'm not including the town center
what we just
amount
added.
because that's not financed through levy or fund
Okay,
balance.
you're right, that would be
So
460.
468 is,
Okay, I'm missing something, but
what's that on the tax levy? Tax rate?
5.6,
About 10 cents.
568,
11 cents.
692.
well,
5 by 45. 10.5 cents?
here's what, I'm proposing that we use $400,000 of fund balance, which still leaves us above 10%, and that we have a 6-cent increase in the tax rate, which is only a 2% increase, which would leave us some dollars for capital improvements once the study's done. My math leaves it about $103,000.
We added 468,000.
Right?
So if you take 400,000 out of that only leaves 68,000 on the tax rate.
No, and then I said a 6-cent tax hike, which would be, roughly $270,000.
What is the balance of the fund with the monies that are already allocated for the budget, after the monies are already allocated?
It's about 2.3 million.
About 2.3 million.
So basically, Alderman Worth, you are making a motion for a 6-cent tax rate increase and the balance to be funded from the general fund.
Well, no, I was making a motion to have $400,000 taken out of the general fund and a 6-cent tax increase, and the differential, which is probably another $100,000 line item, roughly.
If you take 400,000 away from 468, you're left with $68,000.
Yeah.
Oh, I keep adding that 100 in. You're right, I'm wrong. So take 400 away and make it a 4-cent tax increase, and increase something, put a capital reserve fund amount for the capital, once you have the capital study done.
Well, wasn't there already money in the budget
There's already
from
300.
from the reserve fund?
300.
There's already 300
So
baked in.
you're suggesting now 700,000?
Which still keeps us, if I understand correctly, keeps us over 10%.
That's true, but then you're only left with 68,000
Yeah.
fund on the tax rate, which is.
Well, and I'm saying add another line item for capital improvement projects that are determined once we have the capital improvement study.
So you're asking to add more to
Yeah.
the budget?
You're adding more spending.
Yeah, I'm adding more spending.
How much?
And an amount to get us to a 4-cent tax increase and $400,000 out of the reserve. I mean, we have almost $1 million worth of projects on here and projects that are undetermined that we haven't even addressed here. I think at some point, we're going to need to fix that parapet wall.
Absolutely.
I think we're going to need to fix, there's a whole bunch of things, and there ought to be some funding to be able to do that. We're going to end up borrowing anyhow, but you ought to be doing some out of your annual expenditures. You shouldn't just borrow for everything.
Can't we just pull
Why
that
don't
from
you
general
stick
fund
with
if we need it?
6-cent increase? 6 cents on the rate would not be hurtful.
I guess the only problem for me taking the general fund down to just above the minimum, or we want to set it, is you've got no reserve to tap. I mean, I agree you've created a
That's why it's at 10%.
$133,000 account. The goal of 10% is to have 10% as a minimum, right?
Yeah.
What makes us think we're going to be able to put any money back into that next year?
10% max.
Yeah, it was 10% was our goal. Our goal was 10%, not minimum, not maximum.
And your reserve is
10%.
up to the 10%.
That still leaves us, what, 1.9 inside of it?
I said last year that I wasn't going to vote for anything pulling from the general fund unless we had a policy discussion and agreed as a council during the year. And here we are 1 year later, and we haven't finalized our policy discussion on revisiting that.
A lot of policies made at budget time.
And I understand and I agree with that, but this has been a 2-year ongoing issue. Alderman Nervin voted no against the budget 1 year because, we pulled from general fund. I reluctantly voted for it last year, but struggled with the general fund. This is the 3rd year in a row I'm struggling pulling from the general fund. And with all due respect to your policy, I agree with it, but I think that the tax levy is a more sustainable dollar amount. The general fund is your slush fund. So by your statement on what you're recommending, I feel that you're coming forward with taking out of the general fund, levying for that slush fund for capital improvements. If we needed some capital improvements, we could, as a policy body, when those came forward, pull those out of the general fund, could we not? Like if we needed something, the extra. I'd like to see the levied amount go to a sustainable tax rate that we don't have to discuss raising it next year.
Well, that's why I don't care. That's why this discussion, which pocket does it come out of, is kind of, in my mind, a little bit irrelevant. I still think you should target your general fund at 10% each year, and you should have you're going to need, I think, some very small tax increase so that you've got some stability in the budget. Sure, we can, instead of putting it in the capital reserve account, we could put it in the general fund, the same dollars. Dollars are dollars, they're fungible. It doesn't matter if they're in a reserve account or in the general fund.
Right.
But I think ultimately, the concept should be that when we get around to knowing what our capital expenditures are during the year, then we pay that, we spend it down to 10%. What's the difference?
We don't all agree on how we get assessed on our bond ratings based on the general fund. You're at the 10%, other people at a higher percent. So my struggle is to reduce that until we have some substantive data on what actually that is going to do to our borrow rate. I'd like to see that general fund remain as high as possible. I don't think we've
You can look at
overtaxed
historical
people.
data. The city used to have a 6%.
But the
and-
line
and
item-
still had a AA bond rating. I mean, this concept, we've proven you don't.
How many
need
years
it.
ago was that, though?
A decade.
Decade ago was a different borrowing environment.
No, it was, what happened to our bond rating was because of what we did to the water utility.
Okay, well, where we're at today, right now, we're looking at 468,000 add to the budget. If you want to add more, make a motion.
I make a motion to take $400,000 additional. I make a motion to take $400,000 additional out of the fund That's my motion.
Pay,
Fund balance.
fund balance.
The fund
Okay,
balance.
motion to take 400,000 in additional monies out of the fund balance to apply to the budget.
Correct.
There's a second to that.
To take it to 10%?
I'll second it.
$400,000 out of it.
I'll second it.
Alderman Wirt?
I'll second it.
Okay, Alderman Wirt seconded that. Any discussion that we haven't already had?
I think we're shooting ourselves in the foot.
Support that, raise your hand.
I didn't raise my hand. I was throwing my hands up in frustration.
Okay, that fails. 5-4, it fails.
Now I'll also make it, have a 4-penny tax increase,
The what?
a 4-cent tax increase.
The rest comes out of the,
I don't even, did that pass or that failed?
That passed.
That passed, okay.
No,
4-cent tax increase.
Right.
that did not, what was the count on the vote in the last one?
It's 400,000 from the fund. Did it pass or did it fail?
Failed.
Okay.
That's a 1.6% increase. That's less than the rate of inflation.
A 4-cent tax increase. And
Will the 4-cent
Can we assume then-
tax,
How does
will
that
the 4-cent
correlate among
tax
numbers up here?
increase
It doesn't, that's.
cover the
Yeah.
bump that we just added?
What covers what we did today?
Well, the 400 covers most of it. This will cover part of it.
400 failed. though.
400 failed.
What failed? Okay.
So we're gonna need a 6.
Okay, well then I'll propose a 4-cent tax increase and the balance coming out of the general fund.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. 4 cents tax increase and the balance coming out of.
Oh, wait, this is a whole new motion.
We just did the
Yes.
400.
We already made the, it's passed. The-
Oh, they said it
Failed.
failed.
They said
Failed.
it failed.
Not the same
Failed?
motion?
I'm
You
sorry.
didn't vote for that, Dan?
No.
We thought you did.
Where are we at here? I think we're,
Did Tom speak?
yeah.
Yep.
This is a
Just,
new motion.
just to recap where we're at right now.
Guys,
We're looking at about a $266,000 amount on the levy, the 376 from fund balance. 265 is about 5.9 cents. If the committee wants to get that down to 4 cents, then the levy amount would actually, the fund balance amount would actually be over 400,000. To move the difference, it'd be like 180,000, so we'd have to move 85,000 bucks of levy projects over to the fund balance column, and that would be more than the $400,000 amount that failed.
Well,
No, that was $400,000 in addition to the
in addition to the 300 that's baked in.
Yeah.
So now we're only adding,
That was 700.
I understand that, and that's this 376,000.
oh yeah, 4 cents is only
We need to reconsider. How do we do it?
180.
180.
Make it
So you're
6
right.
cents.
It was in the
Okay,
majority.
I'll move to make it 6 cents in the balance out of the fund balance. That was what
And
I
we're-
originally proposed.
We're already there. We're at 5.9 cents.
Well, we haven't agreed to that, though. That's why I'm making a
I
motion.
know, but I just, so everybody understands.
How do
So
we make
the-
that vote?
So say a 6-cent tax increase.
So 376 is really 676 out of the general fund because it includes 300 that's already baked in,
Correct.
just so everyone's clear.
There's a second on the 6-cent tax increase.
Break it in.
With balance.
I'd ask to have a count on the last vote on the 400 because there's a lot of discussion here about who voted which way.
Yeah, I didn't even see it.
Okay. The last motion to add an additional 400 out of
Fund balance.
Fund balance.
the fund,
Which would bring it up to 700.
fund balance.
It's
Call
4
the
to
roll.
5. 4 to 5.
We'll call her up.
Right, but it doesn't believe you, so.
Well, we don't want to, yeah, we want a roll call vote.
So if we were going to take an additional 400,000,
On top of the
400,
3 we've already taken.
Yes,
then it would bring it up to 700,000?
correct.
Yes. We're at 676 right now.
Yeah, can we make that clear? Because I think some people are missing the point. That 376 is in addition to the 300 that's already baked in.
Right.
So we just voted against 400, but we're going to vote on 6 cents and 376. It's practically the same number.
We're voting,
We're
we're
voting on the
bringing
400.
back the vote that just basically took 400 out of the reserve and brought the reserve to about 10%. That was the last vote.
It didn't pass.
We're an additional 400.
Yeah. Okay, call the roll.
Alderman
this
Meyer?
No,
What are
400.
you calling the roll for?
The
last
400.
thing we voted on, if
The last thing we voted on.
Have a roll call vote on it.
God, we voted for what?
To add another 400,000
Yeah.
That was your
to the from the general fund.
So it'd be 700 total.
700 total.
Standalone motion.
Yes,
$400,000 fund balance.
yes.
In addition to what we've.
In addition to the 300 that's already baked in, yeah.
Which is gonna get the balance to approximately 10%. I just wanna be clear. Okay, that's the vote we had last time.
Alderman Meyer,
Yes.
Alderman Worth,
Yes.
Alderman Garrell,
Yes.
Alderman Hawkins,
Yes.
Alderman Nervin,
No?
Alderman Adams,
Yes?
Mayor Avendroth,
No?
Alderman Strelchak,
No.
Alderman Bouquet.
No.
I see, I didn't get where you got the 5 to 4. Yeah.
That,
Correct.
Then the
kind of
next,
hard to count hands. so-
yeah, that's why I wanted the roll call vote.
Okay. So that
Then-
motion passes.
Right, and then a motion to have a 4-cent tax increase.
But that doesn't tick and tie with
So
what we did
yeah.
here. So now we gotta take the 400, plug it into here and see what falls out of
Okay,
the levy column.
How much of a tax increase do we need in order
well,
to?
we don't need to do it. That's too much. So tell us, Tom.
Add 400 to fund balance.
You lost my vote.
What's the exercise? Try to get to 4 cents.
You take 376 to 400, what does that take off the tax rate?
Just, yeah, make the 376, 400, add it back into the other column.
God, this is so irresponsible. It's
You're adding
ridiculous.
24 and subtracting 24? Is that really what you're doing?
Just put a $400,000 number in there.
Help me understand why we don't want a sustainable tax increase and why we're going to pull it all out of fund balance.
Right. I don't understand.
I think that vote's been taken. No.
But I'll explain it.
But I'm going to vote no for this whole budget if I don't get an answer to that question. So it
I'll
does
explain
go
it.
into my end vote, and it is part of the discussion. And I'm tired of being cut short when I have a question.
But I'll explain it.
Please do.
We want both. I do. I don't know what other people want. I think a modest tax increase and keeping the fund balance at 10% is the right way to do it, whether that's 4 cents or 6 cents. I'm happy either way.
Do you feel the 4 cents is sustainable, or do you feel a 6 cent would be sustainable into next year, and we can actually address some of the things?
I don't know what's sustainable.
Because I lost that vote on the fund balance.
I don't know in your mind what sustainable means.
Question on policy.
I want to raise the taxes next year for sure. I want to hold the line.
Question on policy. So if we're gonna shoot for 10%, if we have situations throughout the year that take us below 10%, are we gonna have the guts to fund it to get it back up to 10?
Not without a tax hike.
If the answer to that's yes, then I'm in.
Yeah, we'll do that at the end of the year in the next budget.
It seems like a risky venture. There'll be no more using fund balance next year to help balance anything.
Some of what we've heard here tonight is an interest in revisiting our fund balance policy. While we may not want to move off the 10% threshold or demarcation, this group or this committee, for that matter, may want to consider a range, a fund balance range. You saw that in the slide that Tom talked about.
Isn't it
Because fund balance,
I agree, it's hard to nail on the head every year.
it's a moving target. It's not a static amount of money at any one time.
Overall.
But when you guys talk about a range, then you always want it to be higher in the range.
68,000 to fund.
If the concept is to try to have on an annual
Well,
basis
make it a-
10%.
Make it a narrow range, I don't know.
Be 9 to 12,
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, if the concept is it's a reserve for emergencies, then it's okay to tack into it for an emergencies. You bring it down for the emergencies and you refund it.
If we added 460.
As long as we refund it, then
Right. Yeah,
I'm
we're
cool
gonna
with
keep,
that.
I want to keep it at 10%.
Oh, yeah.
I just question the resolve of,
I'm clueless on how we're going to refund it.
All the actions, all the votes we.
you'd have to levy for it then.
Right.
So I just question the resolve of the body as a whole, not individuals, but as a whole, of actually following through on that if we had to do it. Should that happen next year or the year after? That's my main hesitation with burning down the reserve, but
My opinion on a
I'll put my trust in the 7 or 8 other members here.
My opinion on a 4-cent tax increase is we're guaranteeing a hike next year. We don't have the balance to pull from next year unless we find some savings we didn't expect.
Which will be less likely because we squeeze most of it out this year.
Why is that not 24?
Well, added $133,000.
That is Alderman Brent's
Yeah.
initiative to fund cap projects.
That was not approved, though.
That's true.
The only thing we voted on was taking
$400,000
more out of
Yeah.
the fund reserve.
Yeah.
Because we had,
And then the question is, what do we need to cover it on the tax rate? And
well, we have $68,000 left. That's
dollar,
a penny and a half.
penny and a half. And I'm
Penny
still,
and a half.
and my motion is to increase the
But
tax
why
rate
are
by
you-
4%, 4 cents.
You
461 instead
made
of
that motion
400.
like 6 times.
I know.
It's, yeah,
But he's asking what my motion is, so I don't know if anybody's going to second it, but
Okay. So when we approved 400,000 more coming out of the fund balance, that left 68,000 to fund with the tax levy, increasing taxes by a penny and a half.
What you're recommending, a 4-cent,
And now you're recommending we add 100.
for capital improvements.
Yeah, someone hold off. I'll vote on it.
I don't know where.
Are there
How much are you recommending?
A
we
4-cent tax increase.
spend? A what?
A 4-cent tax increase,
Instead of a penny and a
You want
half.
anything, Andy?
right,
3.5.
which is 1.7%.
135.
to establish a capital reserve fund.
Yes.
So that we can all see this.
Yeah.
Why don't we have Tom
Take a
total up
5-minute break.
the number that he's working? Tom, can you bump that out?
Sure. So I've got $5,000 for cap spending out of.
Doesn't
out of-
matter where it comes from.
This is our tally. This is our
Okay.
tally.
Yeah, I've got the same one he does. My bottom line comes out the same.
$5,000 for police equipment, $6,000 for hydraulic rescue. The memberships with tax levy, $765.
we pause real quick. Those, the 5 for police and 6 for fire, are those annual reoccurring things or those one-time
Those
deals?
are for sinking funds.
Okay, so if they're annual year-over-year things, shouldn't they be on levy and not on, in a perfect world, on levy and not on fund balance?
They should be.
You don't have to decide case by case.
This is a matter of philosophy. If we're gonna fund it year over year, then why pay for it off the one-time account? It's something you're gonna do every year, then you're putting it in the levy because you intend to do it every year.
Yes.
Just as a purist mentality. Open debate on that, and we can certainly decide to do whatever we want, but
Well, the fact of the matter is, you're funding a portion of that request this year with fund balance. That fund balance will not be available
Be there next year.
in all likelihood next year to fund a portion of this amount. So to use fire equipment as an example, 10,000 is in the budget, and you're adding 6 in via general fund reserves. Rolling forward to next year, that number, the base for that number will be 10, not 16. And we'll need to figure out if we're gonna fund it at 10 or if we're gonna fund it at 16. So the fund balance,
so we have to decide if we want to fix it once or fix it forever.
the fund balance plug is a one-time play, yes.
Yep. That's my only point.
All right, then we've got roadway lighting for $10,000 from fund balance. The restoration of council salaries from tax levy. Police vehicle equipment restoration from fund balance. The striping that was originally in the Public Works operating budget as part of their road maintenance program. So I've got that in tax levy.
Well, if that's a particular project, though, why isn't that on fund balance?
I don't know.
Andy, does it matter? Okay, we can move a bunch of the fund balance, but then we can move some other things that are in the budget already to the, I mean, we can move it to the tax levy, but then we can move some things
It
that are
just
in
seems like we have no
in
guiding
the
philosophy
existing,
about which one's which. and-
because it's cash.
I know, but
It's a
we're-
revenue
well,
source.
one is one time and one's a recurring stream, though.
Right,
That's
but
the
we have
difference.
lots of one-time expenditures in our budget that are not being taken out of the fund
I'm
balance.
saying we've got stuff that's year over year recurring in the one column up here and this one-time project that's in the other column down here.
But then let's be, then if you want to be consistent, let's go through the entire budget and do it consistently. Let's make sure that the studies that we're talking about, that are already in the budget that are coming out of the tax levy, go out of the fund balance. I mean, you know,
I'd be for that, sure.
it doesn't matter, it's cash. Yes, is it sustainable? No, probably not.
Okay, let's
Well,
pause.
Where's the
6%
vote
is-
going on
Let's,
this?
let's,
get
let's
through this, okay?
finish this.
What?
Where are we going with this?
We
Is somebody
replaced
making
all
a
these
motion,
things.
or
What
are we
is
just
it?
bickering amongst ourselves?
What happens when we get to the bottom?
All right,
Debating.
let me just
No, we're
finish
not.
to make
We're
sure I've got it right. So,
This is getting ridiculous.
fire vehicle equipment, fund balance for 45,000. Public works equipment, 2,000 from fund balance. EAB, 80,000 from fund balance.
Isn't that
I thought it was
40?
40.
All right, thank
That
you.
was 40.
That was 40.
Then, parking lot improvements, 130 from fund balance. Fire station sleeping quarters, 30,000, half of the 60. Police department training, 1,000 from tax levy. Police officer and the public safety staffing studies, 92,000, tax levy. The rug contract restoration, I come up with 132 and change for levy, 336 for fund balance.
But we just
They
said it's
just
going to be
said
400.
400.
It's going to be 400. So then reduce the other column. We've already agreed it's 400.
Do we make a motion to change it?
64 comes.
You have to be on the winning side to ask to have something reconsidered. You can do it at the council.
There's our $400,000 on fund balance.
Your vote to get it to 400,000.
It's about 1.5 cents for levy.
And
So you
Yeah,
only
we figured that out like 40
Yeah.
minutes ago.
Approve the motion on the $400,000 use of fund balance.
Yeah.
What's on the table is the tax rate.
if anybody wants
And
to
that's
second
in
that.
addition to what you already have in the budget.
Yeah.
Correct.
So that, what is the total amount from the fund balance?
700.
700,000.
The question is, do we,
Also, we can maintain a very small tax increase.
we would have to
Yeah,
on the
voted on
400.
the tax
We'd have to do 1.53 cents if we leave it as is, or find somewhere else to cut, or, you can, if you want to have a slightly higher levy so that there's some money for capital improvements, we can choose a number, some additional money.
Well, let's talk about that. I'd like to have some serious discussion on that because some of the sinking fund accounts here where we're paying with one-time fund balance dollars,
We just put the 400.
there's nothing left on a recurring basis. Next year, we'll have to solve the same problem. That's my only point. Pay for it once, we're going to be right back to talking about it next year, and frankly, I'm not interested in talking about the same stuff next year, although it's going to be unavoidable to some degree. So let's talk about that. What's the name of your fund? The
A capital reserve account.
capital reserve account, okay. I think we ought to have something in there because it's hard for me to swallow doing the year-over-year recurring things out of one-time fund balance because it's just kicking the can to next year. In my view, I know others disagree, and that's okay. It takes a village.
So what's a sustainable amount based on discussion on the reoccurring, that we know that we're going to fund those vehicles, or we'll probably fund those vehicles each year? What's a sustainable amount?
We don't know because we haven't done the study, and that's coming next year.
Well, on top of that, but unless you have.
Can I get an answer to my question?
Well, I'm
here?
trying to.
Okay.
I'm trying to.
Okay.
Unless you can forecast what growth is in the city, and the growth will cover the natural increases of all of the variable expenses in the budget, such as benefits and salaries, which is what, 80% or something, like some gigantic amount of the budget, you can't know what a sustainable amount is. There is no such thing as a tax rate that you can set and leave unless you have either increases in revenues from some other source like growth, or you have increases in taxes, or you have some fees or something else that increases. So you're going to have your concept of sustainability. There's no such thing when you're talking about a fixed rate tax rate. I mean, there's just no such thing.
Because you didn't hear my full question. What I'm looking at is that we've got reoccurring investments that we're pulling from the fund balance. Back to what Alderman Nervin was saying. And as we're getting into the tax rate hike, this is where this discussion's going. I'm not revisiting the past. But we've got, police vehicle allocation each year. We got fire department vehicle allocation each year. I'm looking to see what that dollar amount that probably isn't going to be available at fund balance next year when we have this discussion.
It should be in the.
In order to make a motion, I need that nut so I know what to recommend, because there's going to be a nominal tax rate hike in most probability, but I want a number that's starting out being sustainable. Whether it maintains sustainability for 5 years, 3 years, 1 year, it's at least closer to something. I don't think that we're going to have $750,000 next year to pull from fund balance. I don't know if we'll have 200,000. So I'm looking for a moderately sustainable number to discuss as an option for a tax rate hike this year, so that we've got a sustainable amount moving forward.
Are you suggesting that recurring expenses should be funded by the tax rate?
Yes.
Well, if you don't want to take anything out of fund balance, then it's approximately $700,000, $45,000 per penny. You're approximately 15 cents.
Some of these are one-time expenditures, though.
Right.
I'm looking to peel out the one-times from this list and then just see where that comes
We're
up.
not going to raise it 15 cents.
No, we're not, but you're recommending 4, and I might recommend 6 or 8, and I think one of those two might be reasonable as something that would be sustainable and we can actually do something different in the future.
I originally said 6.
Okay, you can tell where we're at. With 700,000 out of fund balance and a 1.5 cent increase in the tax rate. Anybody want to make a motion to support that?
I don't have my number. What's my number, staff?
Well,
You
somebody else can make a motion.
You just don't come up and say, here, I want to raise the taxes 4 more cents on it, or 6 more cents on it. You have to have somewhere that you're going to put the money for. So if you want to say that you want to add on an additional $300,000
I can't even start to make a motion until I know what my number is. And you're already criticizing my motion or lack thereof.
I'm saying that you just can't add X amount of dollars to it without saying where you want to put something into it in a budget. This is a budget.
So then when I
This
make
isn't
my
just-
motion, I'll add it in somewhere where I feel it needs to be
Alderman
added.
Strelchak, staff cannot tell you what the sustainable number is. There are items within the budget this year that we went through this evening that there was money requested and there was no money allocated. Those requests will likely be coming back
Strictly on this list before us.
next year.
These
Strictly
19
on this
items.
list, we have $160,000 in one-time projects. Replenishing the parking lot fund at $130,000, and we're doing the fire station headquarters at $30,000. That's $160,000. There's $176,000 allocated for recurring capital expenditures. So if you do the math, that's about 4 cents. And if you were to consider a 6-cent rate adjustment to the tax rate, that probably covers your penny and a half up here and gives you a little bit to move forward into next year to address other capital needs.
Okay. And the 6 would go, the difference in between the penny and a half and the 6 would go where? Because it needs to be on the table for.
Capital fund?
It could be dedicated to a capital reserve fund. If this body.
A really
would
nice
so-
boat.
You could reduce the amount you take out of reserves. Half to 6 cents, you don't have to take as much out of the reserve.
That's what I was hoping for before, but I lost the vote on the 400,000 and I can't bring that up for consideration.
Make a different motion. Alderman Giro?
I was, first time around, I voted against taking money out of the reserve, so your count was right. Second time around, my logic was, I really don't, what we're really doing is, the number that we're at by taking out of the reserves is pretty much what we're, DPW costs. That's pretty much it. I would rather see, if I'm gonna continue to vote for or want, or take it out of the reserves, I'd rather see we go in, after all the spending that we added tonight, go back and see if we can't find $68,000 to cut somewhere in this $700,000 add back in or whatever it was. See if we can't find $68,000 to cut and just have a no tax increase, because taking that much out of the reserve fund was very uncomfortable for me. Taxpayers think we have a balanced budget, well, we really don't, because we are paying that. So I'd rather, instead of looking at let's raise it by 4 cents or 6 cents and take money from one reserve fund and then put it in the capital fund, taking that money out of one pocket, putting it in another pocket. I'd rather see us just focus on find $68,000 somewhere prudently out of this thing and have no tax increase and go forward.
It's funny, because before you spoke, I thought what could be taken out so we can have a no tax increase, because 68,000. And as you know, my opinion, and I've been offering up ideas throughout this budget process, because it's hard to spend if you don't have ideas where to cut. 25,000, I still don't feel that public works study is needed to tell us how our roads are, the things that we know how they are, and I think we have a very smart staff, obviously very capable, that can tell us without outsiders coming in. I would cut approximately 12,000 from the alderman's salary. I was very open about that. I want people that want to serve, and I don't have to, aren't serving because there's money there. And last of all, the emerald ash borer, I understand we need a little bit in case there's a huge tree or something. I'd take that down to $7,000. That gets us to $68,000 in cuts. And the emerald ash borer is a very serious thing. It's Kristen said it, it's millions of dollars to ultimately take care of all the trees we're going to have to in the city. We can't just do Band-Aids. We have to have an idea that is very aggressive for the next 5 years, and just putting this little bit isn't going to make any difference. So we'd have 7,000 put aside to take care of the real bad ones we need to bring tree services in for, but then we're going to have to think of a really ultimate goal down the road, be it borrowing, whatever, but the trees are going to be so much, but so 68,000, I cut it out, and I could definitely support this budget then.
Wait,
Motion?
wait, but just to clarify, did you say take emerald ash borer down to 70?
7,000.
Oh, that, just so you know, that would only bring it back to 0, because we're in the hole on that account too.
It's good then.
How far in the hole are we?
But, yeah.
Not a
so
motion,
it's
okay, Alderman Witt.
I would have
Figure out something that isn't.
gone through some of the other items on the second page of the yellow memo and suggested we add dollars in, because I think that there are some critical things to do. Except that we concluded that some of those things should happen, at least I thought, and I heard at least some people agree, after the capital improvement study. The reason we are able to only have this $68,000 difference is because we decided not to address almost any of our capital needs. Now, if we're going to address our if the concept is that now we're going to get to a zero tax increase budget and not address any of our capital needs, we've got and by the way, I've been in favor of doing that. I was in favor of doing it for 12 years. But I think at some point, the rooster comes home to roost, or whatever that expression, the chicken does. Rooster doesn't.
Don't bring chickens up again.
The chicken does. I mean,
Chicken
yeah.
comes
Chickens and garbage collection.
Yeah. Sooner or later, you have to do something with fixing your buildings. Sooner or later, you have to do something with your HVAC and the boom mower replacement or whatever. Now, I think some of it's going to be done with debt, but I think there has to be some ability, some flexibility. So I guess I don't care if we take, I still think we need a modest tax increase, or there's no way we can address those problems. And that's whether we take it out, whether we put a reserve together for capital funds and don't take it out of the general fund. In the middle of this year, we'll be talking about taking it out of the general fund anyhow. I think that's it's dollars are dollars, they're fungible, it's accounting.
So until we do the facility study, you're proposing we take 133,000 less dollars out of the 400? And
Yeah, and it's still, I mean, it's dollars, they're fungible. We haven't done anything to address the capital needs of the city in this budget, except for 2 departments, and a little bit in in public, DPW. And we haven't done any of those 3 departments adequately.
We're letting our buildings fall apart. We really are. We have a parapet wall that is crumbling on the safety building. And there's no money to cover it.
Isn't that like an emergency expense
We're
that
taking
you could take out of
capital
the fund
funds
balance?
down.
Other than that, we need to back up and start at the
crazy.
beginning and say,
It's irresponsible.
maybe we need to get rid of, I don't want to pick a particular employee because I'm not sure that there's anybody who's particularly vulnerable. But, I think doing some of those capital improvements are more important than getting some of our operational things done adequately. I mean, you can't have your buildings fall apart. So if we're going to have a 0 tax increase, then we need to be looking at other cuts, not the things we talked about tonight, and we need to be adding some things in and then cutting. If we're not going to have a tax increase.
So the motion that you made earlier was that
But I got no second.
that we take the 700,000 from, or the additional 400,000 from the general fund and have a 6 cent increase.
Yeah, I mean, that was the motion I made.
And that the dollars that would be produced by the 6 cent increase will create a capital fund to be able to do some of the improvements and repairs that will be identified by the study that we're about to do.
Okay, so that motion's still on the table, I'll second it.
Okay.
Is that your motion?
Yeah, that was my motion.
Second that.
Okay.
I beat you to it.
Nervin beat you to it.
It's a 2% tax increase.
Pardon?
A
His
2% tax increase, a 6 cent tax increase, and the $400,000. That was my motion. And there's 2 seconds now.
6 cent tax increase and
And
$400,000.
and the additional 400,000 from the general.
So
fund.
the
But
delta
you're
between,
spending more money than is
And
requested.
allocating and creating a capital improvement reserve.
with the delta between this list and
Yeah, we don't vote on that. The 400's done, so you're just saying add.
A
you
6
got
cent?
A separate motion now.
Right. A 6 cent tax increase that with the remaining balance going into a capital reserve so that when we have the study done, there's actually some ability to implement some of the capital improvement projects that need to get done. Being conservative doesn't mean being
How much of an increase is that?
6 cents.
regressive.
No, you're spending additional money.
Yeah. Well, we're
Well, it's
allocating
into a
additional money.
reserve.
We're not spending any of it until we have the thing done, and it might end up going into the general fund at the end of the year, if we find out we don't need it.
And
Now
to
you
the
got my
extent
support,
that you're
'cause it's the
using
magic word.
$700,000 in fund balance this year, we're going into next year, and then you've got another budget to prepare the following year, truth be told, a tax rate adjustment, whatever that amount, is gonna help soften the blow as you go into budget prep a year from
That's
now.
right.
I'm not kidding when I say that.
Right.
That was my point earlier, but didn't come across as clearly.
Your Honor, before we vote, can you state the motion so I understand it totally?
Motion is to raise the taxes.
A 6 cent tax increase and approximately, I don't know what it comes to, 270 less, 50 some, or $60,000.
Yeah, you're basically adding 4.5 cents to the tax rate.
Right. Which is
That's
90, 100, and,
190-some thousand.
Tom's got it there.
yeah,
Tom's got it up there, 130.
It's roughly $135,000 capital reserve.
yeah.
It's what, 199,000 for the cap project, our capital reserve fund.
Yeah,
We
'cause you
talked
have to
about
add
135 from taxes, 64 from fund balance. So we're using
Yep.
400K additional fund balance to get us to 700K. And levy amount is just under 6 cents.
Which is how much for like a average home or
$24 for a $400,000 house.
$400,000 home?
$24.
It's 24.
Yep.
Nothing.
We borrowed
Oh, it's
$9
when you
million
got houses over
earlier this year. We knew that was going to be a 14-cent hit on the tax rate.
Right.
If there's ever a year to make an adjustment, this is your year to do it.
We have to.
Okay,
It's $100.
that's the motion. You heard the motion, that's the result.
I agree with you. It's $100.
Any further questions?
I know that.
Alderman Garrell?
Is there a possibility that tonight I can reconsider my vote on the, taking money out of the reserve fund?
Sure. You can bring a motion. You can always bring a motion to reconsider when you're on the winning side of a vote.
Okay, let's see where this goes, and maybe I'll do that.
We have a motion on the floor. We have to take
Sure,
that
I don't
up
want to do
first.
that now, because that might change my vote.
So we have a motion on the floor. Hold your thought.
You're going to vote for the 6 cents, aren't you? So what's the difference?
Any other questions?
So what are we voting on right now?
Essentially
This?
this, a 6 cents tax increase and a
And
400,000.
an additional 400,000?
No, we already have
No,
that
no,
voted.
that's
It's a
already
6 cent
singular
tax
vote.
increase.
Right.
With 135, whatever
So
that
it's
number
just a
is.
6
Moving
cent
the 135 over to the
199.
capital reserve.
Standalone
It's
vote
not-
on a tax rate adjustment.
It's
199
$199.
in a
It's not
capital
135.
reserve.
Yep.
It's
The
199.
135's in the levy side,
But it's really 199. 'cause
Yeah, it's
the-
199.
you have to add right.
but it's
199,000.
135 on the levy side.
It's Tom's funny
Side
man.
is on, yeah. But-
Call the roll.
Alderman Worth,
Aye.
Alderman Garrell,
No.
Alderman Hawkins,
Aye.
Alderman Nervin,
Aye.
Alderman Adams,
No.
Mayor Avendro,
Aye.
Alderman Stralchak,
Aye.
Alderman Bouquet,
Aye.
Alderman Meyer,
No.
6 to 3,
How you counting? What happened?
6 to 3.
6 to 3. Okay.
I'd
Now
move
I'd
it.
like to make a motion to reconsider it on the, taking, $700,000 from the reserve fund.
Okay.
Well, 400. There was already 3.
I'll second that.
You just want to reconsider that action?
Yep. Second.
Oh, I'll second it, I
Yeah, I'll
guess.
second it.
He already did, though.
Just different from what we just voted on?
So what do you need?
It takes the 190 out and puts it back in the capital fund, which really doesn't make any difference, and the general reserve. It still could be spent later, or it cannot be spent later. It's an irrelevant vote.
Tax rate stays the same.
What?
Tax rate stays the same.
Yeah. So what difference does it make?
Reconsidering the vote to take 400 out means we're not taking 400 out.
Well, in fairness, in a point of order, the first vote is to whether you will reconsider that vote or not.
Yeah.
And
we
then a
have to
motion?
actually vote again on that vote.
What's the recourse on the reconsideration? So, you just don't take it out, and then we need another motion to.
You gotta do something, because you created a $400,000 hole in
The
the
first is a motion whether we'll even discuss or consider,
Okay.
and the second is on the
Shall
merits.
we reconsider that vote? Call the roll.
Alderman Garrell,
Alderman Carroll?
Now, what, now,
It's on your motion to reconsider.
Want to reconsider?
oh, yes.
Okay.
Alderman Hawkins.
No.
Alderman Nervin,
No?
Alderman Adams,
Yes.
Mayor Avendro,
No.
Alderman Stralchak,
Yes.
Alderman Bouquet,
No.
Alderman Meyer,
No.
Alderman Worth.
No. Now motion to approve the budget.
Second.
6 to 3?
3 to 6 fails.
What?
Motion to approve the budget.
And a
Motion to approve
second.
the budget and a second. Alderman Adams, discussion.
Just a comment. We only had to take 68,000 out of this to not have an increase, which is, it can be done, and we know we could have done that, I feel. And now suddenly, we have the 6 cents increase partially, so we don't shell shock the citizens, because you think it's going to go up so much next year. And historically, hasn't. I would not make those assumptions. And I feel that extra 6 cents is, it's kind of like a random number. I don't, well, we think we're going to put it here and there. I think as a duty to our citizens, you should, if you insist on a budget increase, it should be where we need to be, where we ended up voting on everything tonight, which was a 1.53 cent increase. And suddenly it's 6 cents. I just don't think that's right. So I can't support this budget.
I don't really care about the impact of next year, frankly. I think you address that next year. I mean, I care, but that's not my reason. My reason is that I know we need a grader. I know we need a parapet wall fixed. I know we need HVAC repairs. I know we have expenditures that we are going to need to make to operate the city during the course of the year that we didn't have adequate information tonight to discern which ones are top priority. And therefore, I think we need to have some money available in order to do some of those improvements.
Yeah, I feel similarly. I feel once we do our capital needs study, what we're going to learn through that process, we might regret not making it a little higher, but got to start somewhere. And I'm satisfied with having a few dollars in that piggy bank to start off with, but we're going to go through a tremendous process of discovery next year when we wrap our hands around all the capital needs for all the city's facilities, vehicles, what have you. We're behind the times, and we're going to have to come to grips with it.
All right, I would just like to comment that I have approved what we just voted on. I voted for what we just voted on, to have a small tax increase. I don't like tax increases, but we're talking about a tax increase at the municipal level for services that are definitely needed. We're talking about buildings that are falling down, parking lots that are crumbling. Those services are our responsibility. But I did want to say that in terms of the process, I'm very happy with the way this process has moved forward. I'm very happy with the responsibility that each one of the staff, the department heads of staff have taken in this process that has gone on for many, many months. I know that's put everybody under a lot of stress, but I want to commend every one of the department heads and the treasurer, and our city administrator and the mayor for taking us to this point. I know that a lot of the discussions have maybe seemed that people might have been pointing fingers at different other people, and that's not really a good thing. But I think as a whole, as a group, that we have all seen our responsibility to the citizens of the city. And again, I don't like to see tax increases. I think but I know we're talking about the municipal part of the budget and the taxes that are going to be going to the citizens. They know that a bigger chunk of their taxes are coming from the school board, bigger chunk is coming from the state, a way bigger chunk is coming from the federal government. And where I see the city becoming vulnerable is on federal policies. I don't want to get too deep into this, but at federal energy policies, when we see the use of coal being eliminated, perhaps this was a cheap, plentiful source of energy, where my energy bills 30 years ago were nothing compared to what they are today. And that's the same thing is true for everybody in this community as well as the city. Operating the city, our energy bills are not controlled by what we do as a common council, but I think that that's going to be something that's going to affect all of us. But back to the point of tonight's discussion, I want to congratulate the city staff on the job they've done. I congratulate all the other council members for their input, and I think we've come to a difficult decision, but I think we've come to the right decision. and next month we'll approve this formally. But congratulations.
We need to have a vote first.
I was gonna say, it hasn't been approved yet.
Well, next
I'd
month,
like to
yeah.
comment and say, you know, I do echo Alderman Hawkins has said. I think our staff has done exactly what this council asked them to do. Despite the fact that I am fairly certain that there's not a department head here who believes that the cuts they had to make in order to bring a zero increase budget to us were wise things to do. You know, the council has been sustaining the 0% or 0 cent increase for 7 years. And as Alderman Worth points out, a lot longer than that. In fact, generating less in tax dollars today than a number of years ago. It's kind of like the medical profession 3,000 years thought bloodletting was a good thing to do, to prevent illness and or to cure illness.
Don't forget the leeches.
But when they stopped to really consider that, we realized that bloodletting had actually been perpetuated because of social, economic, and political influence, not a medical reason at all. And what does that have to do with budgeting? I think what we've been doing is bloodletting on this city budget for a number of years. We are not looking at big picture. We're not looking at a future for our community. Have not been taking into account the needs of maintaining what we have, let alone building on it and creating new things for our city other than letting private development come and controlling the quality of that. We have not been leaders in developing our city in many ways. And I think that our focus has been on keeping things small, keeping the budget small, not allowing even a minor increase each year. This increase is not going to be catastrophic to people in our community. It will allow them to support some things that we clearly need. As Alderman Worth has pointed out, it will give us a little bit of a capital reserve to do some of the things that we know we need to do. We just don't know the priority of them. So I appreciate the work that's been done here, not only by staff leading up to this evening, but by the council this evening. It's time that we adopted this budget.
Alderman Hawkins?
I'm sorry?
Alderman Hawkins?
Oh, we're voting in favor of your?
In favor of the budget, the whole budget.
Yeah. Aye. Sorry. I was listening to Connie.
Alderman Nervin?
Aye.
Alderman Adams?
No.
Mayor Abendroth?
Aye.
Alderman Strelchak?
Aye.
Alderman Bouquet?
Aye.
Alderman Meyer?
No.
Alderman Worth?
Aye.
Alderman Garrell?
No.
Motion to adjourn?
6-3.
Second.
There's been a motion to adjourn in a second. All in favor?
Favor say aye.
Aye.
Good night, everybody. Thank you. Yes. Calling it a thing, but it is an operating.
I didn't remember